Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is July 23rd, 2024. I'm here with my partner, Margie.
Hello.
And we have a blockbuster interview for you today. Today, we're going to be interviewing in our series of returned Mormon missionaries. We're going to be interviewing Rian Anderson. Hey, Rian.
Hi.
We're going to be covering all sorts of topics, including serving a mission during COVID, which we haven't really covered so far. That was its own thing. Mm-hmm. We're also going to be talking about mission presidents and trauma and dealing with a family back home having a faith crisis and even leaving the church while you're on your mission. We've covered this before, but this is its own story in that regard. We're going to talk about mental health issues on the mission. We're going to be talking about having a faith crisis on the mission. And then we're going to be talking about coming home from a mission while your family's pretty much out of the church, but you're still apparently in the church and trying to navigate those waters. And then, of course, just the traditional rebuilding after your Mormon world falls apart. Those are some of the key themes that we're going to be talking about today. Did I miss any key themes, Ryan?
I think that's spot on.
Yeah?
You've lived, Ryan.
That's right.
Already. You've lived some.
Yeah.
Yes.
And do you consider yourself Gen Z, Ryan? Or
I mean, yeah, I was born in
millennial?
2000.
So that's Gen Z?
Yeah, I think Gen Z.
So also Gen Z represent a little bit as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we're super excited to dig in. So before we begin, Ryan, we like to give people a chance to kind of state an intention about why they wanted to do the interview. So do you want to start there?
Sure, I'd love to.
Okay.
For me, coming out of my mission experience, informed consent was something that really lacked in my experience and caused a lot of confusion and I would just say trauma, period.
And when you say informed consent or the lack thereof, in your case, you mean what?
Understanding what you're getting yourself into and whether it's something that's right for you or not.
As a Mormon or as a missionary?
As a missionary and a Mormon.
Okay.
I was going to say both all around.
Okay.
But
you don't feel like you were given the information you needed to have a Mormon testimony or to go on a mission, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I want people to have the information to decide whether it's right for them or not, because I didn't get the opportunity.
Okay, so in part, you want people considering a mission to have the benefit of your story to help them decide if a mission might be right for them or not. Is that right?
For sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's what it comes down to. That's really why I'm doing this.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming all the way from Colorado or from Hawaii, depending on how we look at it.
That's right.
Where should your Mormon story begin?
I'd say when I'm just growing up. Actually, maybe my parents. So my mom's parents were converts to the church when she was really young. And then my dad was a convert in college after my parents met. So I was kind of growing up in the first generation of the church in my family, which we were very typical Mormon. We did FHE every week. We would attend church. We did all the things. We followed the commandments on Sundays. I remember we weren't allowed to ride bikes or swim in the pool or watch anything besides church things, which ultimately made me form my value and what I held important in life to be the church. It led to just the church being at my core. Everything I was came from the church. And my testimony really solidified in the church in high school.
Did either of your parents serve a mission?
No, I was the first in my extended family out of everyone to serve a mission.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
But your parents, they did get married in the temple?
They did. They got sealed in the temple about, I think, a year and a half after they got a civil ceremony.
And were any kids born before they were sealed?
Nope. I was conceived before they were sealed.
But born after.
But born after.
So you were born in the covenant?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just barely. You
totally
slid in there.
Exactly.
So you were the first member of your family to be born in the covenant?
Yeah, I guess so, which is
Okay.
kind of crazy. I didn't think about that, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And then I'm the oldest of 5.
Okay.
So it's me and then 2 brothers and then a sister. And then I have a younger sibling as well who's non-binary.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes, us pioneer stock Mormons would say, oh, converts, they're not as faithful or stalwart. But sometimes converts dial it up to 11 because they want to do it right.
Totally.
Which were your parents?
Definitely dialed it up, like all in. I think there's a lot of fear just in the world in general, but the church provides a remedy to that fear in a lot of ways. So it allowed them to just be all in, which resulted in all of us being all in. Well, I can speak for myself. I was all in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like your dad served in both your parents served in pretty high level leadership college, right?
So when I left my mission, my dad was in the bishopric and my mom was in the stake young women's presidency.
Okay.
But yeah, all growing up, my mom was a really steady president. My dad was an elders quorum. One of the first times I remember being angry with God was when my mom was in the really steady presidency and she was just gone all the time. And it resulted in me kind of taking this parental role over my siblings. And I just was so angry that God would take her away from me. And it felt like an important time in my life when I just really wanted help and I'd say just attention. Because there's 5 of us. So it's, let alone the church taking my mom away into this position where she's gone a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just
When we're talking about those early years, let's just say childhood
Yeah.
and pre-adolescence, do you remember those pretty happily, both with the family but with the church as well?
totally. Yeah. I feel very fortunate in the way like I felt happy and safe. I would say my parents were so good at just making us feel loved. Like I never questioned whether or not I was loved. But I was always kind of looked at as and told that I was special. And I think that also comes with the church and just being told like you're a chosen generation.
Right.
Like you're it for us and for God even. But then also just I'm work driven and I love getting rewarded for succeeding in things.
Yeah.
So I had that idea of just being special all growing up.
When you reflect back on that, the special,
Yeah.
what do you feel like, how did that change you or affect you? This idea of being special, both with church and, in your family or where you're hearing it at school?
Totally. I used to look back on my childhood and just say like I knew unconditional love, but I think with the church and with being called and feeling special or had this expectation put on me,
Yeah.
I had something to prove. And in that, love needed to be earned.
Right.
Even though I was being told like, no, whatever you do, you're loved and you're safe. But the church teachings coming in and being told I was special created this weird opposition with each other. And I held on to that expectation piece a lot and even still do. That's something I'm trying to work on.
Right.
But yeah, definitely impacted me.
So kind of two sides of the coin, unconditional love, but also conditional love.
Totally. Yeah.
And you better hustle for it
Exactly.
because you're special. So the expectations are special for you too.
And viewing it as unconditional love, but in reality, it was conditional love.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So as far as the church's role in your life, preteen, like there's all those happy memories of primary and going to church, and
I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved primary. I loved just the church atmosphere. Like I said, I love succeeding in things, and I was really good at doing what the church told me to do.
Yeah.
And I I loved learning about history. I loved learning about the pioneers and like the William Martin Handcart Company. I loved learning about that. Even now.
Stories.
Yes.
Yeah.
I felt connection to history and to even my ancestors. I felt really connected to my mom's mom, who passed away when she was 16. I never met her, but I loved stories and connecting with people. And I felt like the church really allowed me to do that.
Yeah. And to be clear, your childhood was in Colorado, right?
It was,
so
yeah.
You're growing up in Colorado.
Yeah, I was actually born in Tacoma, Washington, and then when I was 8 years old, we moved to Colorado.
Okay.
So really, my whole memory is in Colorado, for sure, in the Denver area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So in your outline, you mentioned your testimony kind of coming on kind of in high school.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the formation and development of your Mormon testimony?
Yeah, I'd love to. In middle school, I had a really difficult time in middle school. Like I said, all my decisions were made with the church in mind, and what I was being told was right and wrong. So I left friend groups that I really valued and were really meaningful for me because they weren't doing what the church was telling me was right. Like talking about things, swearing, drinking coffee, like these little things, but they felt big as someone growing up in the church. And that resulted in me experiencing a lot of loneliness, but for God, like for the church, I felt like I was doing the right thing. And then in high school, that loneliness took on a whole other level. It was like overwhelming, where I was like sitting alone at lunch and I was seeing all these other teenagers doing these things that I wanted to be doing. But I was doing what was right in my mind, what the church was telling me to do.
Interesting. Yeah. So are you saying in a way it emboldened you to kind of filter your experience and have these standards that you're trying to live?
Yeah.
And then also the result, though, is kind of painful.
Totally.
That your experience then is that you're feeling more isolated. You're feeling more lonely.
Yeah. And it's that quote comes to mind of like, be in the world, not of the world. And I held on to that so deeply.
What types of things?
I mean, I wasn't allowed to watch like a PG-13 movie until I was like in high school.
So friends are talking about fun movies they saw.
Totally. Like, I mean, even just like Twilight or like The Hunger Games, and I wasn't allowed to like watch those, and it felt uncomfortable because, like even just anything sexual was like so off the table because it was just hounded so bad. So, I mean, obviously no coffee. I never swore. Like even I remember in high school, like having bishops interviews and being like, my bishop, like, okay, well then, like, what, like, do you swear at all? And I'm like, no, I don't even like to say, like, shut up or stupid. Like, I was so, in.
It's almost like if there was a standard here, you'd live it here.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I have very much perfectionist tendencies. And it's that expectation piece, too. Whereas, like, I want people to still think I'm special. Yeah. And, like, I want to keep receiving compliments that I'm doing amazing and
Sometimes I call that the Nephi complex.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to be Nephi.
Exactly.
Did you identify with Nephi at all?
For sure. For sure. I would like to think I did. I don't think I thought that, but that was my goal. Yeah.
To be the noble child.
Exactly. Yeah. And as the oldest daughter, there's also an expectation there. It's just inherently there. So
I have a question around that too. You've kind of talked about living, this higher, if there's a standard that you kind of go above and beyond to even, that excellence, that perfection. Especially I'm hearing it at least in social with friends or with movies or did it translate into dress or scriptures or like the more personal things too?
Yeah. It's interesting. Modesty wasn't a huge thing for me. My
Meaning
mom,
what?
Like modesty, or my mom would always tell me like, just wear whatever you want. Like if you're happy with it and you feel good, then go
Yes.
for it, which was one piece of the doctrine where I was like, okay, I can be light on this. So I would wear tank tops.
Yes.
And I mean, I remember going to girls' camp and they told us like no shorts one year, but my mom was like, it's Wyoming and it's so hot. It's the middle of
Right.
summer. You're going to wear shorts. And they were like,
maybe that's the difference between Mormonism in Utah and outside of Utah. Maybe outside of Utah, it's a little less strict about things like that. Maybe?
yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I could see that for sure. But yeah, and then I got called out. I got the state government's president was like, you have to go back to your tent and change. And that was like such a big moment for me. I was like, oh my God.
Oh, she got
Because you
called out.
wore shorts at camp.
And they were like, they covered my knee.
You wore long
Yes.
shorts. The long.
And
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's hot, right?
And it's hot.
Yeah, yeah.
And she called me out in front of my whole women's group. So it's just that shaming piece and that fear of getting in trouble. That was a big part for me. But going back to like the scriptures and the personal things, I loved reading the scriptures. Like I loved the Book of Mormon. I read it every day. I think I started that in middle school and I tried my best to just hold on to it. It felt very comforting to me. And I really loved journaling. Like I think President Eyring gave a talk way back about keeping a journal for like your ancestors, like your future generations. And I held on to that very strongly. And I have many journals from the time I was 10 years old to now. I still love journaling, but they were written in the way I was writing to like my future children. So,
Posterity journals.
yeah, exactly.
And a bit of a filter, because if you're thinking of the audience to which you're writing, right, its function is different.
Yes,
Yeah.
totally. So I would say those are the two main things. I struggled with prayer, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But
Meaning what? Why'd you struggle with prayer?
I didn't do it often, and mostly was like if I was struggling in the moment, I would pray, which I felt guilty about because I knew that was a huge thing.
Was there any part of you that just didn't pray as much because you didn't feel like you got answers, or was there some other reason?
I mean, thinking about I found more comfort from reading the scriptures and like visibly seeing and hearing what God was telling us.
Is there a part or two in the Book of Mormon that really were strong for you, a story or a character that really
I'm trying to
moved
think.
you? No pressure.
I mean, I loved Nephi.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I loved Mosiah. I remember really loving like King Benjamin's
Yeah.
talk about. Feels very like progressive and like free thinking and comforting, and just the way like God knows best. Like, just turn it to Him and it'll be okay. Like, just keep following and you're loved. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I'd say probably Nephi and Mosiah are probably my favorite books.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in your high school years as a Mormon kid, again, was there conflict? Was there drama? Was there tension? Was it all goodness?
Yeah, I really struggled in high school. In Denver, there's not as many members in the church. So in my youth group, and especially in my young women's classes, I was often left out. And I mean, I would hear about like parties going on, and no, I wasn't invited to that. And I wasn't the only one. There were other young women who also weren't invited, but there was definitely like a main clique. And if you weren't part of the clique, like you're not doing cool things.
Got it.
And I also had that kind of perfectionist piece where I was just holding on to the church so much. That I was just hoping things would get better, but they never did, which turned me to gaining a really strong testimony around the atonement of Jesus Christ. And that happened my freshman year of high school. In seminary, I had a really amazing seminary teacher. He was a really good family friend growing up, and he's just a really great teacher. He makes the scriptures like come alive. But we were studying the Doctrine and Covenants, and he was talking about how he gained his testimony of like Joseph Smith in his freshman year of high school. And I was like, maybe it's time that I really like solidify my testimony and like really dedicate myself to the church, even though I already was. But in your mind, it's a constant rededication. But I remember reading in the New Testament about Jesus Christ and his atonement, and finding so much comfort in that idea that Jesus Christ took on everything for everyone. He experienced everything. I think that's scripture in Alma, like Alma 7, 11, and 12 or something, about how Jesus Christ experienced every burden, every pain, every injury, all the things you could possibly imagine. Like, he understands. So it was like a built-in friend for me. That's how I viewed it, because I was lacking in friendships. So I held on to that so deeply, and it became a part of me that pushed all questions aside. All questions just went away because Jesus Christ knew how I was feeling.
That's so powerful.
Yeah.
You know, because what I'm hearing is loneliness also excluded, which I think is another layer, right?
Yeah.
And then this person, this Savior, who actually, he knows you. Totally. He suffered by suffering and knowing in advance, right? The idea of knowing who you are and suffering for sins for you in advance. You have this sense of someone knows you, someone cares about you.
Totally.
Someone sees you.
Totally. Yeah. It was a huge moment for me.
And also, you know, we often talk about this in terms of shame, how religion will tell you a behavior is bad,
right,
and then offer itself up as the cure for the sin. In this case, it seems like the church made you more isolated. This is what I'm hearing you say.
Totally.
That the church made you feel more lonely, made you feel more isolated, and then offered Jesus as the way to make you feel better for your isolation. I'm not trying to put those words in your mouth,
resonates really deeply with me.
Interesting.
So I wasn't sinning. I never really felt like I was sinning, but I just had these big emotions of loneliness, of fear, of like wanting to have friendships that I was seeing other people have, and that wasn't there. So Jesus, like I said, was that person. Yeah, for me.
But and you mentioned not doubting, but then you also mentioned having some doubts.
Yeah.
For a few reasons. Do you want to talk about the doubts that emerged in high school?
Totally. I grew up always saying like I would never go to BYU school. I was kind of just that person who like wanted individuality within the church, but also I was just so in depth in the church and following all the rules. But I started having questions when I heard about polygamy being a thing, and I had no idea like how deep it went, but I was like, that just feels wrong to me and like demeaning as a girl and a woman. Like, that's not something I want. And why would God do that? And why would like Brigham Young do that? And I had no idea that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy at all at that point. But just the whispering of that idea was really hurtful. And also just the fact like all these promised blessings were being promised to me, but I wasn't experiencing any of them.
So?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
I just like having connection and being more in tune with yourself and God. And like, I wasn't feeling anything,
I got it.
you know?
So it's the plan of happiness.
Totally,
and
but
you're
I
like,
wasn't
not
happy.
I'm really not feeling so happy.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and I'm not really experiencing that happiness that's promised, you know? And obviously I'm a very positive person, so I view that time with positivity, but I know I wasn't happy necessarily. So it was just this weird time.
Yeah.
So were you aware at the time of that disconnect, or is this reflection, like, were you aware as you're living this next level Mormonness, right?
Yeah.
That like, oh wait, and I'm feeling like isolated and kind of sad and hard on myself and all these things. Were you aware of that tension at the time?
I was aware, but I wouldn't call it a tension. I would just say like I held both things at once.
You noticed it.
I noticed it, but didn't realize it was a big deal.
Okay.
And my parents were always so good about letting me bring up questions and being like, oh yeah, that's totally understandable. Like, let's talk about that more. Or so these discussions, when questions did come up, were open and like always turned back to like God being the answer, and he just knows best.
What were your parents' response to the polygamy problem?
I don't think I brought that one up to them until later.
Okay.
I first wrote down faith crisis in my journal after I went through the temple for the first time.
Okay. And that's when you're getting ready for your mission.
Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I have a question just around, so you've described your family kind of culture a little bit. It did all, like the family culture did all the Mormon things, family home evening, going to church and having the Sabbath, having a kind of, and then you're also mentioning those some open conversations. Would you take a minute and maybe just describe your family culture a little bit, how it felt for you in those years growing up through high school?
Totally. Like I said, my family were so good at making me feel loved, like, and supported in anything I was dealing with or what I brought up to them. I just felt loved. But with that was this interesting separation of church comes first and family comes second. But also my parents saying family comes first, church comes second.
Lived reality.
Yes.
Versus,
And the lived reality part was definitely church came first before family.
Yep.
So even though I was being told like family comes first, it didn't feel that way. And I don't think I realized that at the time.
Yeah.
But
Meaning it felt like your parents sometimes were putting the church before family?
for sure.
Is
And I
what
think
you
that came with callings.
Yeah.
Right.
And being in leadership and how much time that
Absolutely.
consumes. And that left me in the position of babysitting my siblings very young and coming to this like parental role that made me grow up really quick while also being very naive because of not being part of normal social teenager preteen things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which then likely supports further isolation because
Exactly.
you're at home doing. Do you want to?
Being mom, basically.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Do you want to talk about that role of kind of what it means to be the oldest daughter and some of those things and how it kind of, let's just say, influenced your identity
Totally.
during that time?
Yeah, I'm 3 years older than my brother right below me, and then my 4 younger siblings are all fairly close together in age, like 1.5 to 2 years. So I definitely have the biggest gap in age, which that alone put me into that kind of mother role. But I felt very close to my siblings. Like it created this attachment to them that probably wasn't the healthiest, but you just love them so deeply and you care for them. So it's like, you just don't want anything bad to happen to them. I remember just like fearing, first of all, I just looked up to my parents so much, but also I just loved my siblings so deeply.
Yeah.
And just, yeah. That was a big part for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then speaking of family, you
Yeah.
mentioned one of your siblings also contributing to some questions, right?
Yeah. So after high school, I ended up going to BYU-Idaho. I really wanted to go to BYU Provo just because it felt more progressive. And at the time, I understood that my family was more progressive in our ideas, not in the way we were living, but in ideas.
Yeah.
So I didn't get into BYU Provo, but I ended up then defaulting to BYU-Idaho. And while I was at BYU-Idaho, one of my brother right below me came out as being gay. And that brought up a lot of questioning because I loved my brother deeply. And I didn't understand why the church would have teachings against being gay. And I hated the love the sinner, hate the sin. I hated that. And there, especially at BYU-Idaho, we would have church lessons on the LGBTQ the plus community, and
What would BYU-Idaho have to say about gay people?
the love the sin or hate the sin kind of thing. Like, okay, you can be part of the church, but you can never get married. You can never live your true, authentic self. And that felt wrong to me. Yeah. That was different than what I felt God was to me. Or even at that time, I started really holding on to the idea of heavenly parents, the fact that there's a heavenly mother and a heavenly father. So I would definitely use the wording of like heavenly parents at that time. And that felt wrong that they would do that. I'm like, why would unconditionally loving parents say that their child can't live authentically?
Right.
And that felt so wrong to me. And it never brought up those good feelings that like Jesus brought out in me. So I just, doubts started coming up around that. And then learning more about polygamy.
At BYU-Idaho?
Yeah. Just like, it's interesting. You have conversations with people surrounding these things, but it's very much like, well, God just knows best. Like, you don't really talk deeply about it or like really learn the history. You more just are like, well, God will figure it out. Like, but that's where I learned that like in heaven that we still believe that like men would practice polygamy.
Interesting.
At BYU-Idaho.
Yeah.
So there's like acknowledgement of history and then a dismissive.
Exactly.
Like dismissive statements or
always dismissive
that are designed to have people feel faithful.
Yes.
If they exercise that. Oh, got it.
But also it's training you to go against your intuition.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because your intuition's saying polygamy bad, church saying God knows best. Your intuition's saying my brother should love who he wants to love. Church is saying same-sex love is bad. So seems like you're being conditioned to ignore your instincts and feelings, your inner self, basically.
Totally. Yeah. It's like tearing from yourself. That disconnect is just becoming bigger and bigger and bigger during that time, for sure.
You mentioned purity culture is also a crack. Can you talk about what that meant? What you meant by purity culture and why it was a problem?
Totally. In Colorado, like I said, there aren't as many members. And we always kind of had the view of like Utah and Idaho being like too Mormon, like the weird type of Mormon.
Yeah.
So entering that community after having never, ever been in that type of environment was so eye-opening. And
you mean Rexburg?
Oh yeah, Rexburg. Yeah, Rexburg.
Is that what you mean?
Yes, Rexburg for sure.
What was eye-opening?
How men treated women, I would say. I got ghosted so many times. Got just from like trying to go on dates, and then like they just stop talking to you. And like then they're going out with another girl like the next week, and you're like, this is so confusing. Or like you have a date, and then they're like, oh, I got to go meet this other girl, and you're like, what? Like that's not like what I thought was right, or what I thought was right and felt right. I also got like stood up several times where I would show up at like the place we were supposed to have a date, and then they just would never show up. Right. So it's like this lack of caring about the individual. Right. And more about the experience of finding someone to marry. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like everyone's on the plan and they're just trying to find the person to fit the slot in their plan.
Exactly.
So you felt kind of dehumanized.
Totally. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I also had a part where I loved my teachers. My teachers were amazing. I was studying nursing. I've always loved helping people. And nursing has just been something I've wanted to do since I was in middle school.
Yeah.
So my teachers in the medical field were just amazing and so progressive and like eye-opening. I was like, oh my gosh, I fit in. It gave this element in my mind that this was the right thing for me and right place for me to be, because these teachers were just allowing me to express what I wanted to express and were agreeing with me, which was huge because my peers were not.
Okay, peers still not.
No,
but
teachers were. Oh. Yeah.
Anything else about Rexburg, BYU-Idaho purity culture? Because you talked about feeling like a number. What else about purity culture in BYU-Idaho?
Just,
Is it modesty? Is it
I mean,
dress
modesty for
code?
sure. I had a bit, I was so against the honor code.
Yeah.
That's one reason I didn't want to go there.
What's wrong with the honor code?
It just, what is it wrong with the honor code?
No, for never Mormons that are watching.
No, totally.
Yeah.
So they restrict what you can wear. You can't wear sandals. Like I couldn't be wearing Birkenstocks. I couldn't be wear capris. Any jeans with holes in
What's
them.
wrong with capris?
Yeah, exactly. That's
Okay.
my question too. Showing those ankles.
Wait, literally BYU-Idaho
Yeah.
forbids capris?
Capris. You have to wear full length.
Full length pants.
What the?
Interesting. Wow.
No holes in your pants.
Shorts?
No shorts unless you're like working out and they're like designated workout pants.
Like knee shorts?
Knee shorts,
Like
yeah.
basically guys' shorts that go down to your knees?
Yes.
That's the only type of shorts
Which can
you
be
wear.
very hard to find,
Yes.
by the way.
Well, they sell them at the bookstore. So
Oh,
That's
interesting.
interesting.
they also, if you're attending the gym at Rexburg, you can only wear their designated BYU-Idaho t-shirt
Yeah.
that they sell.
Yeah, that's so like 1970s.
Totally. When I attended in 2018 up to my mission. So about 2020. So about 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay, and then shoulders bad. right?
Shoulders very bad. No multiple piercings. Men can't have beards.
What about
Haircuts. Yeah.
haircuts?
Yeah.
What about, I've heard something about your purse strap can't go around, like because it makes your
Split.
breasts
Yeah.
look
Can't
more
cross
pronounced.
over or something.
Did you not experience that?
I didn't experience
What
that.
about
I
yoga
didn't hear about
pants?
that one.
What about yoga pants?
Oh, yeah. You can only wear black leggings if you're going to wear yoga pants. Only black leggings.
Okay.
So, like, no colors or, like, they had to be solid black.
Specifying color.
So no stripes on the side.
No.
What?
Or, like, mesh. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's for if you're attending the gym on the campus, which everyone does because Rexburg's very small.
Yeah.
Not much to do.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
And then anything about sex or sexuality, either high school or BYU-Idaho?
Totally. Sexuality was very cut off for me. Like, I didn't really have the opportunity to even explore that at all. I didn't date anyone until after my mission. So it wasn't a big part of my life. It just felt very shameful. Like, I was afraid of that for sure. It was a big fear.
So people talk. Yeah, I guess I was asking also just how it's talked about.
Oh, totally. Everyone just feels like an object rather than a person
Yeah.
when you're talking about them in the way, like, you're just trying to get married. That's just what it felt like. And that's something I didn't want for my life. I was like, I'm work oriented. I want to work. I don't even know if I want to be a mom. Like, and that did not work with what my peers were discussing or wanting in their life.
Yeah.
There's another discrepancy between you and what the church is teaching.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Totally.
Okay.
But I also don't want to skip over the fact that you just mentioned that your sexual self, you feared it and you disconnected from it early.
Yeah. It wasn't a part of my life, I'd say. More, it was just fear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Julie's asking about skinny jeans.
Well, actually, I think skinny jeans were allowed, just no holes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you were there around what year?
I started in 2018, fall of 2018. Yep, to 2020.
So that's 6 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. To 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 4 years ago. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just crazy. It feels like a whole different time.
I bet.
It's a different life.
Now, this would have been the time where it was normal for Mormon young women to serve missions. So at some point after a year at BYU-Idaho, how did the mission come into play for you?
Well, I never wanted to serve a mission because my family there was no experience of missionary work in my family. And I wanted to work. I wanted to become a nurse, and that felt like my missionary work.
Right.
But school, I was not liking school. And nursing is just very difficult and exhausting.
Yeah.
So I wanted to take a break. And I knew I wanted to help people, and I knew I wanted to travel. So I started out by looking into like volunteer trips online where you could choose where you want to go. There's no religion involved, and you can spend as much time as you want to spend
Love it.
there. right? Because I wanted people to feel loved and
Yes.
like as who they were. Like they wanted them to experience unconditional love. And at BYU-Idaho, you hear so much about the mission. It feels like everyone has served a mission. And that's not how it is, but it feels that way.
Was that the whole culture of like getting your call and bringing everyone together to announce
Excitement.
what your call was?
Yeah, getting everyone. It just felt like the recognition that I wanted. For like, it was an indicator of success as a missionary, as a member of the church.
And did it lure you a little bit too? Because it's a way to go above and beyond again, that expectation or standard.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I was like, God knows I want to go out of the country. So he's going to take me out of the country. And he's going to make me, like, help me learn a new language and experience this thing I want to experience because he knows me.
Right.
And at that time, they came out with sister missionaries can wear pants. And I'm such a pants girl. So I was like, okay, I can do that. Yeah, that seals the deal for me. That's right. And I think a little bit before then, they released like, you can talk to your family every week. And if that wasn't a thing, I would not have gone.
Yeah, because before you could only call home twice a year. When I was on a mission, I called home Mother's Day and Christmas. That's
which is insane.
Yeah.
I can't, like that was out of the question. So when they changed that, it was like, okay, I can do this.
Right.
They literally changed that because we made such a stink about it, saying missions are cult-like, and they finally listened. So
that's amazing.
I'm going to share in a tiny bit of credit for that.
You should.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we brought missionaries on Mormon Stories that were like, they'd go through hurricanes, you know, in Houston or whatever, and they couldn't call home. You know what I mean? Like, and their parents were like, "Are you okay?" And
That's
it's like,
insane.
"Nope, can't call home."
Wait till
People
Christmas.
die. No,
Yeah.
you can't go home. Can't call home. You know. Anyway.
Wild.
Okay, and were your parents? Did they make you feel like they wanted you to serve a mission at all?
They were very much like, do whatever feels right for you.
Okay.
That's always how they've been. So it was more my decision of that wanting to be looked at as a successful.
Okay.
So like social pressure
Yeah.
and your internal drive either for recognition and also to be excellent, to
Exactly.
be perfect or do all the things.
Yeah. And it felt easy because it was like on my mission, I explained coming out on a mission, like it just happened to me. Like obviously I made active decisions, but it felt like such a blur. Like it was like, okay, I'm meeting with the bishop. I'm filling out the paper. I'm getting my call. Like it just felt like it was happening.
It's
to
like
me
a factory
instead
there.
of yeah, totally.
Would your bishop there have wanted to encourage as many of the people in his ward to serve missions as possible? Would the wards have been set up to feed people into that factory?
Totally. Well, I think most bishops in Rexburg, but I actually went home to Colorado after it was in the summer, and I filled it out, the paperwork with my home bishop.
Okay.
So he knew me well. Obviously, I'd been in that ward for like my whole growing up.
Okay.
So.
And what was your testimony like right before you went on your mission? Super strong? Or were you having...
It was a tough time. It was like more and more questions started coming up with my brother being LGBTQ.
Now, did he want to leave the church or did he wanted to stay?
He loved the church.
Okay.
But I loved my siblings so deeply. That I was like, this organization is hurting him. So like
that role of caretaker too, I think plays into that sometimes when you're placed in a role as, you know, an adult figure in the home taking care of. I do think, do you feel like it allowed you insight into like a mom where you're like, I care for him, I know him, I want what's best for him, and even protectiveness.
Totally. Yes. Yeah. I mean, that just resonates with my experience for sure.
Yeah.
Feels spot on. But
So even though he was still wanting to stay faithful as a gay teenager, that was causing you right before your mission to question things?
Yes. And then also like polygamy kept getting brought up and that just felt so wrong to me. And I didn't like the atmosphere at BYU-Idaho. So it was like all these things were like just building up and the tension became higher and higher. And then it was time to go through the temple. And that was
Was that before your call or after?
That was after my call. So, so my call, I really wanted to go out of the country.
Language.
But I was nervous that I wouldn't. So I didn't invite any friends. It was just I flew home. It was just with my immediate family. I think my grandma was over video call or something. And I opened it up and it said Newport Beach, California. And I was so disappointed.
Yeah.
And I was trying not to be disappointed, but I was like, why? What in the world would I go to California? I mean, my family reunions were in California. Like, I knew California, and I wanted to explore somewhere new because that was where I was going.
Did you have a country you were hoping for most?
I mean, I really wanted to go to like Switzerland or like even just South America. I was like, literally anywhere outside the United States, I'll go.
At least it wasn't Idaho or Wyoming.
Exactly.
No offense, Idaho or Wyoming people. Nebraska.
True that though.
Iowa.
But I did have my freshman year seminary teacher, his family had moved to that mission. So he was living there. So that was kind of like a really cool thing. It was like, oh, I'll have someone that I know in that mission. So maybe I'll get to like serve in his ward and like, and I loved his girls. I babysat their girls for all of my young women years. So it just felt cool.
I'm curious in that moment where you had your call and you had that initial letdown experience of like, I'm curious your thought process. Did you recondition yourself? Like because we're taught in Mormonism, this idea of like, if you have a negative feeling over what's been given to you from God, it's like, okay, well, he knows me. And so clearly I know this, or this is a challenge and I'm meant to go there, or whatever it is. But I'd be curious your thought process from disappointment to if you kind of got yourself back on the program successfully, thinking the way you should, or if it remained a sticky point, if it was hard for you actually to get back to the conditioned response.
I definitely was pretty quick to get back to the conditioned response. I mean, I had read the talks where the leaders of the church discuss how they choose missions for people and how they assign, like, through such great prayer and, like, study and, like, through God. So I was like, yeah, of course, this is where he needs me to go. The people there need me.
Yeah. Like the truth is they're assigning thousands a week or whatever.
Exactly.
But they want to make it sound like the apostles there and like somehow it's computer assigning thousands, but somehow he's still
feeling your
talking to God and making it a personal choice. So we are led to believe that God is literally, putting you in that position. Now, is Newport Beach, is that Orange County?
It is, yeah. So it covers like just below Long Beach to just above San Diego.
And my understanding is it's pretty heavily Mormon, like a lot of wealthy, influential Mormons. There's a temple there, right?
Yes, Newport Beach Temple.
Yeah.
I mean, it's stunning.
Yeah.
It was so fun to be in like all these fancy houses, which I'd like never thought of ever witnessing, and it was just fun because there is a huge Mormon culture, and it tend to be pretty progressive.
Oh,
like it feels like it felt that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So you want to talk about your temple experience?
Sure.
Yeah. How was that?
I went into it really excited because these people I looked up to, my grandparents, my parents, my young women's teachers, bishops, like all these people that I really looked up to valued the temple so greatly. And from like the youngest age, you're taught like this is the epitome of your existence here on earth is going to the temple. Mm-hmm. So my mom had explained to me like some of the things that would happen in the way like you can kind of keep it sacred, but like explaining, but I had no idea what it would be like. I had attended a temple prep class at BYU-Idaho, but even then, very vague, and you don't really understand what you're promising or like what is even going to happen.
Right.
So I went into it hoping the best, like really excited and trusting the people who I loved. And I almost had like a panic attack in the temple.
How come? What parts?
Yeah, do you remember?
Yeah. I love the initiatories because am I able to like talk about what happens? Okay. So women bless women, and that felt so empowering. I was like, oh my gosh, women like do have the power of God.
Meaning
in
they
the
put
temple.
their hands on your head and
Yes.
say blessings.
Yes.
And they bless certain parts of your...
Yeah, and put like oil on your head and these sorts of things. And that felt really amazing. Putting the garments on the first time was like, oh, this is my life now. This is my forever life. And yeah, but it was still okay because people I loved did it and were living that way. So then I went into the endowment room and I felt, first of all, it was so weird that the women were on one side and the men were on the other. It felt very like segregated. And also everyone was wearing these weird clothes. Like everyone was wearing white. The men wore these like weird hats. And I was like, what is this? Like, what have I just walked into?
They're like baker caps.
Yeah, they look like chef, like little mini chef hats.
And they come straight from the Masonic Lodge. So Google Masonic clothing and you'll see what we mean. Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. But
oh, you didn't know that?
I didn't know that.
Oh, the whole temple ceremony comes from the Masonic
I knew it was
Lodge.
Masonic, but I didn't realize like the outfits too.
The robe,
attire.
the little
That's
apron,
crazy.
the robes, the hats, all Masonic. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I had watched the documentary Wild Wild Country on Netflix before.
One of our favorites.
I mean, it's so good.
Yeah.
But so cult started to be part of my language at that time when I watched that. So I was going through the endowment and I was, off the bat, as we started putting aprons on and like sashes on, I was like, this feels wrong. Like my mind and entire body are screaming at me that this is not right. And like, why is everyone just going along with this? And then I remember because I went through the Fort Collins Temple. So there's multiple rooms that you go through for the endowment. So in the second room, before you go through the curtain, the veil, they call it, into like heaven, celestial room, because it was my first time going through, they made me go last through the veil. So at some point it was just me and my mom sitting in the chairs. And I asked her about this because I just remember like for the first time in my life having these red flags go off and like, I'm in a cult. Like my mind just kept going over and over the cycle. Like, this is a cult. I'm in a cult. What is happening? And my mom just like looked over and put her hand on my hand and was like, are you okay? And I was like, I just shook my head. Like I didn't even know. I was like about to like have a full blown panic attack. And she was just like, we can get through this. Like you got this. So obviously went through the veil, did all the signs and tokens, and my whole family was waiting there. Like my grandparents, my leaders, the bishop, like all these people that I looked up to that had come in to support me in this really special experience were there. So I just put a smile on my face and like tried to like push everything I was feeling down. And then we went back into the changing room after kind of hanging out in this celestial room. And I took off the things you put on during the ceremony and then my dress. And I was like sitting in my garments and I was just sobbing. Like, and my mom came in and was like, what's wrong? And I asked her and she was like, you were just pale white. Like all the color from your face was gone. Like you were just not yourself at all. And I was like, I don't know, but I do know God wasn't part of that experience.
Yeah.
You said that to her in the temple?
I think in the temple, or it was very quickly after, or in that moment.
Yeah.
I was going to say the idea of you're not yourself or you are fully in touch with yourself.
Yes.
Right.
Totally. It's like this weird, like back and forth of me connecting with inner me.
Yes.
But also like this outside source that is taking so much.
Yeah. And that juxtaposition, I would imagine, of through the veil and you're having such a disconnected experience to the white, the peace, the love of all the faces, but you inside are like screaming.
Yeah.
That's really an interesting, very
Yeah.
violent kind of
Totally.
thing to consider for you.
And it was like I trusted and loved all these people. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is what they've been doing? Like,
Yeah.
what? It just made
All
no
this
sense
time.
to me in my mind. And I was like, it just felt so culty. And culty is like such a general term. I don't really like to use it, but because it can apply to so many things. But I do feel like it's important to recognize cultish behaviors within an organization.
Yeah.
Weird dress, weird
New
religious
name, which I had
rituals.
no idea.
You were
I'd be
given a new
receiving.
name.
Yes. Which I was like, why wouldn't God just love me for who I am and my
Yeah.
name? Like, I love my name.
Yeah.
So it was just all these little pieces. And
Did
then
you like your new name?
it was all right.
Okay.
Can I say it? Okay, just, yeah,
up to you.
yeah. I mean, it was
Yeah.
Phoebe, so I was like, "Oh, friends, obviously, that's fun. I can remember that."
That's a good, yeah, seriously.
Because it was like, "Never forget this," and I was like, "Oh, perfect. I'll always remember that."
Yes.
So, yeah, it was just
That's amazing.
Right.
This is one of the first times anyone's ever revealed their temple name
Oh well,
on Mormon
there you
Stories.
go.
Okay, so you're Phoebe.
But yeah, I'm Phoebe.
I'll be Ross.
Apparently
Do you
to
want to
God.
be Rachel?
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm kidding. I went too far. I took it too far. Edit. No, I'm kidding. You don't have to edit this out. Okay. So, keep going. So,
But yeah, so we went to dinner afterwards with like my grandparents and my aunt and uncle who were there. And it was like their first time going back after a long time. So it was just a really weird, and I just couldn't say anything. Like I just couldn't function. I would just like nod and try my best to like be part of the conversation, but I had no ability to like
Yeah.
be myself.
Yeah.
And after we went back home and I just sat in my bedroom, like sobbing, I was like, I'm about to go on a mission. Literally in like 4 weeks, I'm going to leave to dedicate my life to this. And it feels so wrong now. And my mom came in and she just sat on the bed next to me. And I just told her, I was like, I don't think I could go. I don't think I could go on my mission. And she was like, that is okay. You do not have to go. Like she's just so
Props.
amazing in the way, like, just do what feels right to you. But all these expectations
Yeah.
of me going. I mean, my grandma had bought a whole new wardrobe for me. I was about to give my going away talk in church. Like all my peers at BYU-Idaho knew I was leaving. All these people I loved like expected
right.
me to go. And I myself expected me to go.
Yep.
So the shame of not going was too great. But it was still this moment of like, I can't teach these people this. Like, I cannot do it.
Yeah.
But my mom brought this idea of like, well, some people don't like feel the spirit in different places in their lives. So maybe the temple's not the place for you. Maybe the mountains are. Like, maybe that's where you feel closest to God, and that's okay. Like, this idea of, okay, the temple maybe isn't right for me, but also it's supposed to be right for everyone. And
it's supposed to be God's most sacred ordinance
yes.
for his chosen people.
Exactly.
So, but your mom was also modeling sort of a buffet Mormonism where you pick and choose the things, which is actually healthy.
No.
But
Yes.
but
And it
also not
felt
very
good.
Mormon.
Yes. And it felt comforting when
Yeah.
she did say that.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, okay. Then I'm okay then.
Yeah.
Like, this is okay.
Yeah.
It's weird and challenging, but that was the first time that I wrote down in my journal I was experiencing a faith crisis. That was the first time I ever used that language, was that night when I wrote in my journal. And I was like, this is a really bad time to be having a faith crisis. Like, I'm about to leave on a mission to share this with
Wow.
people.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I keep noting these, but like, again, the temple, you knew it wasn't right. You knew it was a big red flag, and and it's almost impossible. I would like to meet the 18 or 19-year-old young man or young woman who like goes to the temple before they're going to serve a mission and then like calls it all off and says, sorry, mom, dad, sorry, bishop, sorry, all my BYU friends, sorry, siblings. This church is too culty for me. I'm out of here. Almost none. Like if there's someone who ever did that, I've never heard of them, or I don't remember ever hearing of them. And it would be less than 1/10 of 1%.
It would be just an exception.
It's impossible social and familial pressure.
It's a current. It is an actual current that you are in and riding.
It's like you're in the Colorado River at level 5 and you're expecting a kid to somehow just hop out.
I mean, that's the perfect explanation, and that's how it felt.
Plus it invokes Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Perfect. Win-win. But it just was overwhelming.
And then also just your desire to go foreign, like that's so not Mormon to have any preference for where you go, really. Or to say, I don't want to go domestic, I want to go foreign. But the truth is, you're going to give 1.5 years of your life, you're paying in most situations. Why shouldn't you be able to say it's worth it for me if I can have an international experience and learn a language versus I don't want to go to Arkadelphia, Arkansas or like Mud Lake, Idaho. Like that's actually a reasonable inkling that you had that you also just had to stuff down.
Like have a say.
Totally.
Have a preference.
Like it was already a loss of self that was happening.
Yeah.
Even before my mission.
Bit.
Yes.
You're
Like these little events were just separating me from myself further and further.
Yeah, I see it.
So,
such a good point.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how
then
was
I left my mission.
You went?
Yeah. And before I left, obviously my dad was in the bishopric. My mom was in the stake young women's presidency.
Which adds to the pressure.
I was going to say,
exactly.
so those are higher profile callings as well.
And we had been in the stake for so long that we knew everyone. Like everyone knew who we were.
Yeah.
I knew everyone. So just a lot of like peer pressure.
Okay. How's the MTC? The Mission Training Center.
Totally. I struggled immediately.
Is Provo, right? Provo?
Yeah, I went to the Provo. Yep,
Okay.
yep. Only there for 3 weeks because I wasn't speaking a different language. I loved my companion. My companion in the MTC was amazing. She was like such a gem, and we shared kind of the same struggles of that loss of everything normal besides the church. I mean, right away, you feel the effects of like not being able to watch TV, of not being able to scroll on Instagram, not even having access to any social media, no music that you like to listen to besides church music.
Yeah.
All these things that kind of make you in some ways are like taken away.
That's
right.
right.
So it's like this immediate grief is what I like to, I wouldn't identify that at the time. That's not what I would have said. But now it's this loss of everything besides the church.
Yeah.
So then over time, you turn to the church and it becomes your identity. For me.
That's right. It's almost like the conditioned self. I guess there is one before, but it feels so much more intense with the mission, which is so ironic because you're like, I think I need a break from the nursing program.
Well,
I'm going to go on a mission, which is such an intense, amped up experience. But it feels like a new intensity of the conditioned self emerges and kind of hijacks you. Is that kind of what you're saying?
For sure. And it was like, I was told like the mission is such a good time to like find yourself and explore new things and meet new people and have this amazing experience. I mean, I can't even count the amount of times I was told like, it'll be the best 1.5 years of your life, like most important, most enjoyable time.
Most enjoyable.
Yeah. I think maybe only one person, one of my roommates at BYU-Idaho mentioned like, it's going to be the hardest time of your life, but worth it. So I was like, well, yeah, it's going to be awesome.
Sounds great.
But then in the MTC, you have this shock. And it's like, even we couldn't even sing like songs we liked in the showers. Like,
You mean like pop songs?
yeah, like a sister missionary told on us. And like,
What were you singing?
I think just like I think it was literally Les Miserables, like from the
One
musical.
day more.
No, literally. I think it was that song.
And that internal policing, I think, is an important aspect of to show the level of intensity there and the importance of rule following.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it really reinforced that, like, immediately.
So they told on you for singing One Day More in the shower.
Exactly.
And then how'd you find out?
Because you have sister training leaders who are like sisters put above kind of the newer missionaries in the missionary training center. And they told us, like, you can't sing in the shower anymore. They just banned singing in the shower, which was like, well, that's like so enjoyable actually, because it's like a moment of like not focusing on the church, but that was taken away as well. And I quickly realized the mission wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I don't really necessarily know what I thought it was going to be because no one else in my family had ever served a mission. So I didn't have that aspect of kind of knowing what you do on a daily basis or what you teach people. Like, I didn't really know that.
Oh, I see that.
So it was like immediately all these like role-playing activities of teaching people like Joseph Smith's first vision. And I was like, I don't really even care if people like believe this. I just want them to be happy and like feel loved. So I was like, okay, I just need to get through the MTC and get out into the field and it'll be better.
Were there other parts of the plan of salvation as you're thinking about, okay, I got to teach them tithing. I got to teach them the 3 levels of heaven. I got to teach them the atonement. I got to teach them the restoration, the apostasy. Were there other parts of the lessons or even baptism where you're like, I'm not sure I want to teach this to people?
Definitely baptism. I mean, that was a big one. I was like,
that's the whole point of missions.
No, exactly. Which it seems crazy that I didn't even realize that. Like, I missed that part. I missed that lesson. So,
where was that memo?
I was like, wait. So I was like, if people are happy with where they're at, I want to reinforce that in their lives.
Yeah.
Even though the church was like who I was, like the church was how I made every decision, really, it felt like. But I also hated the feeling of being like a salesperson for the church. I noticed that right off the bat, that it was you're a salesperson. That's how it felt. Very business.
Yeah, I don't know if non-Mormons or even Mormons have really thought about this, but if you're Baptist and you're baptized, well, a Mormon will say you need a new baptism. If you're Catholic or Lutheran or Presbyterian, none of those baptisms count. So it's not only if they've just never been baptized at all, it's if they've been baptized into a legitimate Christian church, well, that baptism's not good enough either.
That's right.
Right?
Yes. And I really struggle. And people don't understand that.
No, other Christian churches are like, oh, Lutheran, Baptist, Presbyterian, it's all baptism, not with Mormons.
No. And it's really difficult to tell that to people. Yeah. And it honestly turns them off most of the time, which makes sense to me. And it made sense when I was a missionary. I was like, obviously, that's offensive. Like, that is something that's meaningful to them. And I'm telling them it means nothing.
It didn't count.
No, exactly. I'm like, what? So
the other thing is the reason it doesn't count is because it's not done by the proper authority. But you as a Mormon woman don't have the authority to do it.
So who am I to tell them? No, yeah. I mean, it didn't, but yeah, exactly.
I mean, these 18-year-old boys that know nothing, they can baptize you for real where it'll count. But I can't because I'm a woman.
Totally.
Mormon.
Totally.
Okay, now I'm sorry.
No, it's true though. It's just, I think that aspect also felt demeaning too. Of like, I felt on a level playing field as the people I was teaching, if that makes sense.
Not superior to them.
No, not, I mean, inherently, I think as a growing up Mormon,
the specialness.
Yes, is built in. The us versus them is always going to be there because you have the true church and they don't.
That's right. And that's behind baptism. The whole thing John was saying is the specialness is behind it.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
So the MTC ended up loving it by the end. I loved the missionaries I was serving around. They're so fun. I loved being able to like eat all together because all the missionaries get together and eat in this one big cafeteria setting. And the food is actually, I heard it wasn't good, but I really enjoyed it. Like you could eat whatever you want and it was just amazing. And growing up with five of us, I mean, if you like something, you weren't able to get a lot of it because it was gone by the time you got to it, you know? So it was fun to just have like this freedom in a sense of like being with people who are all doing the same thing. We're all kind of struggling. I remember maybe my second week in the MTC, me and my companion during a study time, we sat on like the 4th floor of the classroom building on the MTC campus, and we were just sobbing, looking at the cars driving by on the street past the fence line of the MTC. And we were just like, I wonder what music they're listening to. And I wonder if they would pick us up if we jumped that fence right now. And just this, what are we doing? Yeah. And it's literally going to be 1.5 years. Like, we haven't even started our mission, really.
Wow.
And these people are just living their lives. And like, why aren't we doing that? But of course, you push that aside and you're like, no, I'm doing what God wants me to do.
Yeah.
Like, why am I feeling this way? And then internally shaming yourself for feeling that way.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that duality, it's interesting, isn't it? The flip back and forth from, having this part of you emerge where you're feeling a lot of loss and even yearning for the life now that you're separated from.
Yeah.
And the people you're separated from. And then that other part that's just like, yep, but this is what God wants you to do, and the people need you, and
so we're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the time Stephen Hassan, kind of the world's cult expert, came to Salt Lake, and he kept talking about this idea of a cult personality.
Yep.
Which is not and I don't think it's constructive to call the Mormon Church a cult on Mormon Stories, so I tend not to, but just this idea of a healthy organization or relationship is going to get you to cultivate who you are, what you like, what you care about, and to help you build up that. So you have the strong sense of self and motivation and direction and values. A cult's going to get you to care about and value what they want you to value, even if it's totally against what your inner soul or spirit or conscience is saying. And the mission is just the way to drive any of that out of you. And you just assume, as a salesperson for the church, they're telling you how to dress, how to act, how to behave, what time to wake up, what time to go to bed. You can't be alone with anybody. Like, the Mormon mission is the most cult-like.
Yeah.
I mean, it probably rivals the temple as the most cult-like aspect of Mormonism.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And by the end, I was so confident in myself because the church was my whole identity. So I was like, I knew what to do. I knew how to teach a lesson in a drop of a hat. Like, I knew how to do it. I knew how to do what they were telling me. Yeah. So I was confident. But like, what's the price of that confidence?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
self-denial, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And lack of self-development, probably.
Yes.
So anything else about the MTC or?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you go to.
Yeah. I loved it by the end, and I was sad to say goodbye to these missionaries that I had grown close to.
Yeah.
And that's a common theme throughout my mission, is this loss of like friends I was building.
Yeah.
But I got to the mission, and I, right off the bat, felt a lot of love for my mission president and his wife.
What was their career background? What was his career background?
He owned a business. I don't remember what kind of business, but he had sold it to come out on the mission.
Probably millionaires.
For sure.
Wealthy.
For sure wealthy. Yeah. Very wealthy.
Yeah.
But as a missionary, your mission president and his wife are like the closest thing you can get to God. Like, and they are like, I viewed them as like my parents on the mission, and I trusted them to take care of me. My parents trusted them to take care of me. And I just thought they wanted the best thing for me. So I immediately trusted them.
Yeah. It's like, if you were to have been asked that first or second week in the field, who's closer to God? Who knows God's will more, your parents or your mission president and his wife? What do you think you would have answered?
Mission president and his wife, easy.
Yeah, yeah. So there's somewhere between parents and God. Probably you respect them or value them as much as your parents, plus God.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a lot of power.
Exactly. Yes, a lot.
Yeah.
And I do think it's important to point out that this is a theme in Mormonism too, this idea of trust without earning it, right? And it plays into wards, with us moving into a ward and immediately calling people brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so. And with mission presidents, with bishops, it's like, no, there is no earning of trust. We have no sense for actually how trust should work. And so it can make you vulnerable. You just give it.
Totally. Yeah. And that's a common theme, I think, throughout my life. Just because I did look up to these adult figures in my life so much. I valued their respect of me.
Right.
So
how'd things begin?
I remember getting called into my first area. They have all the trainers sit on one side of the room and all the new missionaries sit on the other. And I think I arrived to the mission with about 6 or 7 new missionaries. So all these like older, more like matured missionaries that we immediately look up to because it seems like they know what they're doing, are like sitting across from you. And then the APs, who are like the assistants to the president, they're like right below the president in power, and like they feel very godlike. Start reading off your name and where you're gonna go. There's no map or anything. Like you have no idea like where this place is. But I got called to Dana Hills Ward in Newport Beach, California. And I heard that the ocean was part of the area we were in.
Is that Dana Point?
Yeah, Dana Point.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah.
Dana Point was
I've
like
been
where
there.
I lived.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's just stunning.
Yeah.
I immediately fell in love with the area. And my trainer was awesome. Like I obviously just immediately looked up to her. She was my role model. I mean, your trainer's like is teaching you the ropes. I remember leaving the mission home and going directly into like our first lesson. She was like, we got a lesson, we got to go teach it. And I was like, I haven't even like unpacked, or like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't even know how to teach a lesson. But we ended up doing that, and I was just like so blindsided and realizing like, oh, the MTC is what we're doing. Like they are actually training you for what you're going to be doing as a missionary. But I was with her for 2 transfers, so 2 6-week chunks of time, and we stayed in Dana Point.
So 3 months, basically.
Yeah, and I loved the people. Like that was my favorite part of missionary life, was serving people and like helping them, like pull weeds and like sort through like papers for these elderly women in the ward. Like I just lived for that. And dreaded with like my whole being teaching lesson, like having to go teach a lesson.
Yeah.
Or like knocking doors was like the most anxiety inducing experience for me.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm pretty introverted and shy, I'd say, when it comes to like sharing my beliefs, especially. So the idea of like just knocking on a random person's door and like trying to make a sales pitch for the church felt so uncomfortable, and my brain would like shut off. So then my trainer would be mad, understandably, because that's frustrating for her. She's like taking on this huge workload. But I just felt so insecure and like hurt all the time, because I didn't know what I was doing and I didn't like what I was doing. But in some way it was like God needed me to do this thing.
Right.
So
now, some would say that's a great opportunity. Of course, you're scared, you're insecure, but then you gain skills and then you gain confidence because you overcome those fears, and that's a great preparation for the rest of your life.
totally. And I agree with that, but I also think I could have gotten that in a different way without the church involved, because then it creates this element of you're solely confident in teaching the church. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what I hear you saying is, for whatever reason, the why and the how weren't resonating with you. Why you were going to the door and saying the thing, right? That you were
Yes.
having a disconnect with that belief, even though you had the conditioned self. And then the how you were supposed to do it. This idea of like, it's so scripted when you get to a door, which I feel like can feel very inauthentic, very, all the things. And what I'm hearing is that there were enough barriers for you that it actually kept you from being able to actually do it. Is that right?
For sure.
Yeah.
And along with like knocking doors, it was also like I said, you have no TV that you like. You're not allowed to read the books you like. Like my mission president was very strict on music, so nothing with drums or any beat. So Mormon Tabernacle Choir or like acoustic versions of EFY songs. So it was very limited on music choice. And like music is such a big part of like me feeling my feelings. So like that part's taken away, let alone there's no time to like really express how you're feeling anyway, or like let those things surface. So for me, preparation day, when I got to call my family on Mondays, was that time where like I just would break and everything would like be released.
What do you mean you would break on those calls home?
Get all the feelings like I was suppressing. Like I was obviously never diagnosed with depression or anxiety, but I was depressed and anxious 24/7. So on those calls, I would just like break down into like my mom would just be like, "How are you doing?" And I would just break down
So
in
your
tears.
calls, you would cry each time.
Yes, like bawl and like have a hard time like making out words and sentences, like trying to tell my mom like what was happening, but also not understanding why I was feeling this way.
Yes, because you're doing all the things. You're
Yes.
doing what's asked of you. You're doing and again, you're having this experience where the experience is feeling different than what you've been told it should be. So it's happening again.
Yes. So it was really hard. And our calls were only an hour long. So it'd be like, and preparation day is from like the time you wake up at 6:30 to 6 p.m. Like preparation day, it's not a full day. It ends at 6 p.m. And then you're back to work that evening. So oftentimes I would be calling them at like the end of the day, like 5 to 6. So then 6 would come along and I'm like bawling and I'm like, I have to go. Like I need to follow. Obviously I'm a rule follower. So I need to follow the rule. I need to end the call. But I'm crying and I'm leaving my parents with this situation that they don't know how I'm doing or like if like how I'm recovering and like functioning after those calls.
So hard.
Yeah.
I remember being discouraged from telling your parents anything sad or bad happening to you. What was that? Was that still a thing? And even if it wasn't, I imagine there's a part of you that might feel like a failure if you're telling them you're hating it or not loving it.
100%.
What was that like for you?
And that's definitely still a thing where you're like, they don't recommend you tell your parents the challenging stuff, but I was really close to my parents and like, I would tell my parents everything, like even in high school and stuff. And they were just it was a very open conversation with them. So it would be so unnatural for me not to tell them how I was feeling. And they're people like I know.
Yeah.
And that's like the first conversation in the entire week where I'm talking to someone like I'm familiar with and who knows me. So I'm like, oh my gosh. Of course I'm going to like collapse.
And in that way, likely is this reminder of yourself. All of a sudden you're back to a relationship, people who care about you. So it's like, it must have felt, did it? Like, a coming back to yourself with like this flood of emotion.
Exactly. Almost that reconnection with inner you because you're so disconnected the whole week. And then it's like a little shadow of familiarity is gone. Yeah.
You know, now that I'm thinking about it, for decades and decades, again, you could only call home twice a year. That was probably helpful in walling you off from your inner self and from your former self. And it was probably led to a, quote, happier mission because maybe it would be almost re-traumatizing to constantly be in touch with your home, to be hearing how things are going, to be able to be authentic in your feelings versus just wall them off and stuff them down. I mean, there's a reason why they did it for so long, and they were shamed into stopping it. So I imagine that might have made it harder for you to be shutting off who you are. I don't know.
I agree. And I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if they haven't had more issues since, like mental health issues since that change. Because every week it was like these feelings are being brought back up. Instead of just keeping them down and bottled up.
Because I'm really good at shutting off my feelings, like scary good. And I do think my mission, because I was in Guatemala, like the food was awful. It was scary. There was coups d'etats with tanks driving through the streets. I couldn't call home. I had parasites like 6 months, but you just suck it up. And so like, I think the downside of that is I just learned to shut off my feelings.
Totally.
Which, I don't know, in some ways strengthened me, but in some ways caused maybe some issues later.
Maybe. Maybe there's a long-term cost to that. Maybe that's not what we're going for.
I mean, it worked
ideally.
for me. Did it not work for you so well?
It worked for you.
This has been an ongoing thing. I'm like, I'm doing great. Maggie's like, you're not doing great. Ask the people around you.
With a lot of love.
Anyway, not about me, but more back to you.
Back to you, Ryan.
But yeah, I think the mission it's supposed to train you to disconnect from yourself and your feelings.
Yeah.
That's like,
Absolutely.
I'm convinced that's one of the purposes of it.
Yeah.
And I like to think I wouldn't have stayed if I went to another country. So in a lot of ways, I'm grateful I stayed in the country and didn't have to learn a new language, because I think that would have destroyed me.
Oh, yeah, it's awful.
But
Interesting.
also, it was familiar. So it allowed me to accept staying, even though I was so uncomfortable. So,
Let's talk about some of the bad things that started happening. Maybe.
Some of the touch points.
The first thing that I remember happening is my second transfer. And I had kind of this revelation moment of like, I'm supposed to be here. Like, we had just found someone really cool to teach, and I had like finally broken out of my shell and like taught this really great lesson. I felt really proud of myself. And we got back in the car, and I was like, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm serving a mission. And we got back to the house, and my trainer, she was like, I didn't want to tell you this, but since you're like really in on the mission now, one of the missionaries you came here with has gone home, and like she decided to leave. And I just remember like my body just like having this physical reaction of like, I'm so jealous. Like, I wish I could go home. And like, I had just talked to her a few weeks back when we were doing like interviews with my mission president, and we had talked about like how we had some of the same struggles, how we missed home and our family, and like how we were kind of struggling. And she went home. And in a lot of ways, it was like, that's not an option for me. Just because of who I was, and also like fear of, well, one person in my group went home, so like I can't go home now. Like, it's just a weird mental space to be in.
Yeah.
But that's just how my brain took it.
Yeah.
But I stayed in Dana Point for 2 more transfers, and I got a new companion, and I really struggled with her. She was very controlling, and anytime I would do anything, she would always have a critique. It felt like I was doing nothing right. Which on top of like struggling as a missionary and like daily life and what we were doing, her control of everything just took so much out of me. But during that transfer, I think it was the first transfer, we had someone murdered in the apartment above us. Luckily, we weren't there when it happened, but we were driving home from getting groceries on a P-Day, and like our entire apartment complex was like blocked off and we couldn't get into our apartment. And then we had to like call a member because we have no access to news to like figure out what happened. So she like researched our apartment and was like, yeah, someone like got murdered in like literally the floor above you, which made my companion very uncomfortable. I had worked as a CNA in a nursing home, like in between high school and college. So I was pretty comfortable with like death being something that's kind of just natural. And it wasn't, I was dealing with so much that it wasn't like it didn't really affect me at all, but it really affected her.
Okay.
So she wanted to meet with a therapist. And she asked me if I wanted to join her, and I was like, why not? I mean, it's a therapist. Why not?
Sure.
Someone to talk to besides you. So
Right.
I met with her, and she was like, how are you like doing with like missionary life? And I was like, I mean, struggling, but surviving. And she was like, do you want to keep meeting with me? I was like, sure. So that's how I started therapy on my mission.
And is this an LDS therapist?
Yes. Designated to work for our mission.
Okay.
And she saved my life. I mean, obviously she was an active contributor to staying on a mission and staying in a harmful situation, but she helped me make it out alive.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm grateful for her. But that's how I started therapy, which is
Okay.
kind of crazy. I'm grateful that something major happened and forced me into that.
You know, I'm reminded of the LGBT research I did, and a lot of the LGBT Mormons that did conversion therapy with actual therapists still reported benefits of therapy. Because even if you're doing conversion therapy that's known to be harmful, the fact that you're meeting with someone regularly, expressing how you feel, somebody's listening and showing empathetic regard, that's positive, even if the actual therapy that they're using is toxic and causes harm.
Totally.
It sounds like there was something like that going on.
For sure. I mean, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. And in that time with that certain companion, I started forming really deep relationships with these people we were teaching and coming in contact with. And I remember writing, I kept really good journals throughout my whole mission. I wrote a page a day. So I have it very well documented, which I'm grateful for because it helps me remember things. But there was a certain member, she was less active, and we started meeting with her, and she shared that she struggled with the temple, and she struggled with how the church treats LGBTQ members and how the polygamy is a thing. And I was like, I'm not the only one that struggles with this. And it was just eye-opening. And she loved us so much. And just helped us anytime we needed anything. And it was just eye-opening, just having someone share those same feelings and doubts. But also, like, I didn't want to teach her. Like, I didn't want to force her back in the church or anyone we were teaching. Yeah.
So how'd you proceed?
I got moved after my fourth transfer, and I had baptized 2 people at that point. Who one was the less active's now ex-husband, and then another man we had met who we had gotten really close to as well. So leaving was like that another loss, like huge loss, because it was like I felt I loved these people. Like, and I had this connection with them, and like I had spent so much time with them, and they had been part of this part of my mission that I'd struggled deeply as well. So that connection just grew with them, and being taken away from that was a shock. I got moved from Dana Point, which is more north in the mission, to Vista, which is like way south, like closer to San Diego, and like farmland.
Can I ask you a quick question
Yeah,
about
totally.
Dana? So you mentioned the murder happening in your apartment complex.
Yep.
Was it an unsafe apartment? Sometimes missionaries are put in unsafe living conditions.
That's a good question.
It's a wealthy area, so we definitely, in almost all areas I was in, were in, I would say, the most unsafe apartment complexes in the area. So for sure, yeah.
So it wasn't just a random murder; it was an unsafe living condition.
Yes.
And that's one complaint I think is legitimate that people have. If the church is worth $250 billion, they can afford decent living conditions for the missionaries, especially if the missionaries were by and large paying for their own missions.
Yes. I was fortunate enough when my family started struggling with the church, the ward took over my payment for my mission.
But even then,
they're still paying.
don't want
and
you in
people
an
are
not the
paying.
church paying with
No,
their $250
exactly.
Yeah.
Which it doesn't make it okay at all.
Plus, have we ever thought about people paying to be salespeople for the
No.
church? It's like, I want to go work for IBM. So all my friends and family, will you help pay so that I can go be a free salesman for IBM? Like, it's a little bit weird.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I have so many times in my journal where I was just at the end of the night, like, why am I paying to be a salesperson? And like,
Yeah.
I'm literally not able to do anything I like. And I'm paying for this, or people I love are paying for this.
Yeah.
And how unfair that I'm not enjoying it. And like, they're still paying for me to be there.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
there's a lot of guilt.
Yeah. Okay. So you felt unsafe in that first area.
Yes. Yeah, I'd say so.
How about the second area?
It's very rural and low income area, I'd say. So more unsafe than
Less safe. Than
less
Dana
safe.
Point, yeah.
No one got hurt or anything, but there was lots of contention in the apartments around us, and it wasn't a safe area. They had elders there for, the members said, like years. They'd never had sisters there. So by that point, COVID had started.
Okay.
I kind of skipped over that. But in March, so that was my second transfer with my trainer, is when COVID started.
Oh, so soon. So kind of
So
soon
quick.
in your,
Yeah.
wow.
So at that point, we were stuck in our apartments through my fourth transfer. We were quarantined. So I think that was like March to about July. We were teaching from our apartments over the phone, unless it was
Okay.
someone we had previously taught and known and were okay with us like coming over to their house or sitting outside.
Okay.
So that was also playing into like tensions running high with my second companion because we were inside all day. It was just us.
Yeah.
We were very successful in having Zoom calls with people. We had many lessons every week. Like we were teaching like 47 lessons a week over the phone because people were home and they had
And
nothing else to
lonely
do.
and isolated.
Yes.
Right.
And we were a friendly face who like would listen to them and like share good thoughts with them. So it was very successful in teaching during COVID in my mission.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It was still people in your area.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we had started teaching a lot with my trainer. So when I had my second companion, we had a lot of people to teach. And we were cold calling. So we were literally we opened phone books and just started like calling people. Or an area book, the app that we missionaries have that lists all the people missionaries have ever come in contact with in that area and their phone number or address or whatever. And we would just be calling.
It's like
for hours.
instead of door-to-door sales, it's like telesales.
Exactly.
outbound
exactly.
telesales.
Even more miserable.
Well, I was going to ask about that. So the stereotypical Mormon missionary is knocking doors all day long to try and find that golden investigator, and they're out walking around, getting exercise, meeting people, talking to people. In this switch, number one, the world is imploding because there's a global pandemic, but then you're basically doing telesales and you're cooped up all day.
Yes.
What was that like?
hurt mentally and physically. I think my back is like permanently messed up from COVID because we would sit in these, I mean, there's not great furniture in missionary. You're literally like collecting stuff from like the by the dumpster. You're getting whatever people are leaving. So we had these wooden chairs, and you would just
for furniture, you're collecting
furniture.
stuff out of the dumpsters.
Yeah,
as
next
a Mormon
to the dumpster.
missionary.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That was a pretty common thing.
Which that's where you got your furniture
I
from dumpsters.
hated that. Yep. And we would sit in these hard wooden chairs, like typical dining chairs, and we would just be on Zoom calls for hours. And on top of that, we had no idea what COVID really was because we had no access to news. My mission president wasn't communicating what COVID was or like what we needed to be concerned of. What we were hearing were from people we were teaching or members, and everyone had such extreme views on the situation. Some people were like, it's fake. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's whatever. It's like made up. And then these other people who were teaching who would be like, maybe you should consider like going home and being with your family. Like you might be unsafe and like maybe you need to go home. I remember one guy in particular who like really cared for us. He had no interest in the church, but he was so kind and just caring for us. And he was a great source of information. He would like try to send us news articles, but we couldn't pull them up because of all the restrictions on our phone. So it was just very confusing. We were just like, okay, I guess we just have to stay indoors and everyone's sick. I don't know.
So is part of the process that your phone is taken over? I'm sorry.
No, totally.
So like, is that in the MTC or, and things are placed on your phone so that you can't, is that the idea?
Yeah. I think a lot of people get a new phone for just their mission because they put a whole system on it when you enter the MTC. So you're going through the airport, flying. I had to fly from Denver to Provo to Salt Lake City Airport. I had no phone, no way to communicate because the phone doesn't work. And then you get to the MTC and they have you set up this system on your phone that controls the apps you can download, what you can search on Google, only church-related things. You can access the BYU website or like, I don't know what the church's website is called now, churchofjesuschrist.org or something.
So you bring your own phone, but without a SIM card, fully deleted, wiped everything clean.
Yes.
Then you show up, they give you a SIM card that they control, and they install a bunch of apps so that they can monitor. They can limit everything you can possibly learn or do, and there's software to monitor everything.
100%.
Right? Yeah.
There's an app you can pull up that has every app listed that you've accessed and how much time you spent on it, which plays into phone audits, which are weekly. You switch phones with your companion, go through what you've accessed. It's a way to like.
So you'll go through your companion's
phone.
texts.
Yes, emails, photos.
So you're
everything.
policing
And what's
your
the
companion a bit?
Yes. I think it's just a way.
Looking for what? What
Pornography.
types of things? Okay.
Accessing music, movies, like anything that you're not allowed to access, you're looking for.
Communicating with old friends.
Yes.
Or
yeah.
love interests.
And
whatever.
on mine, I think every mission president's different. Mine was very strict in like what we were allowed and what we weren't allowed to do. But we were not allowed to, sorry, I forgot what I was going to say.
No, it's fine.
But
so yeah, you're auditing each other. What do you do if you find something they shouldn't be doing?
you tell the leader. Yeah, you tell the sister training leader or your zone leader. I don't even know what you would do. I was always someone who expected and thought the best of people. So I would never turn anyone in for if I found anything. Like that was something I would not do.
Right.
But others would.
Oh yeah. I mean, people got sent home. So
for doing stuff on their phone.
Later, I didn't realize that until I was called a sister training leader and like put above other missionaries and told all these problems. Wow. But people were often sent home.
What would a missionary get sent home for doing on his or her phone?
Accessing pornography was a major one.
That'd get you sent home.
Yes.
Okay. Now, how could you access pornography with all the controls they had?
I didn't know. I didn't know how until I was a sister training leader. And the zone leaders were like, we found pornography on one of the elders' phone. And I was like, me and my companion were like, what? How? Like, how in the world could you even have that? But they showed us there's a way to hack into like settings and then like you access Google Drive. Like it's this loophole way that you figure out.
So missionaries figured out ways to look at porn on their devices.
Yes.
And if both missionaries were into porn, they're just going to let each other look at porn and not confess, I'm guessing.
For sure. I mean, I would think so. Yeah.
It's like, you don't tell, I won't tell.
Totally. And you would get emergency transferred or sent home if they found like movies on your device. Because I know when I was a missionary, there's like Google Drive folders going around with like all these Disney movies and like just normal movies.
They're like, give us something.
Yes.
We'll take Disney, sure.
So that played in later on my mission when we ended up having like a mission-wide phone audit, which was really traumatic. And
I mean, let's talk about that.
You want to talk about it right now? Okay, perfect.
I mean, just because it's in topic.
Yeah. So I was in Newport Beach area during that time, and I was a sister training leader. And like I said, me and my companion had talked with our zone leaders and found out like pornography was an issue. So one of our first, it's called MLC, Mission Leadership Council, where all the sister training leaders and zone leaders go meet with the mission president and his wife and like receive trainings from them, just the leaders. So it was one of our first like in person after COVID. So we were all like really excited to like be together as a group. We got there and obviously the opening stuff. And I think there was one training or something about Joseph Smith or Book of Mormon or something. And then two elders get up and they said, everyone is going to put their phones in this bin. And they had this plastic bin and passed it around. And you could see people's faces just like turning white. Like it was just like all the color left to their faces. Like
I could imagine some missionaries wanting to like reset their phone really quickly, right?
I mean, and you
delete everything really quickly on their phone.
Yes. And
do you know if that happened or?
I'm sure it did. Oh. I'm sure. I mean, I was more afraid of like someone finding something on my phone, like even though I knew there was nothing on there, but it's just like that shock and fear and lack of privacy that was so alarming.
Yeah.
To everyone.
Yeah.
And so pass the bucket around, everyone puts their phones in, and then they explained that they would be handing out phones to everyone, random missionary phone, and they were going to walk us through how to do a real phone audit. So we had this other missionary's phone, and they also explained that if you did find something, do not return it to the missionary after and return it to the president, who was sitting in front of us.
Okay, and this is literally because of the scenario I just mentioned. If two companions are complicit, then the audit's worthless. But if you get all the missionaries together and randomly distribute the phones, then it's harder to have complicit auditors.
Yes.
Is that right? Is that what we're talking about here?
Oh, totally.
Okay.
And
so the buddy system wasn't working.
No, it was not working. They were figuring it out, unfortunately. But I was afraid like they were going to go through like my emails because that was like the last sense of privacy that I had as a missionary. Like, I mean, I would be honest with my mom, like I was struggling with like opinion or like whatever, like these little things. But I was afraid that someone would think that that was against policy as a missionary.
So were you scared?
I was so scared, even though I was such a rule follower.
Wait, so someone could go through your emails to your parents and read them and decide if...
They handed out a piece of paper that had, it was like the tiniest little font and like split into 2 columns on like a page horizontally that explains step by step how to check each of the apps, each of folders,
Wow.
Google Docs, like folders within folders, and like it was wild
Yes.
and scary.
I can imagine.
And you're not even thinking about having to do this to other missionaries at that point, but you know everything's a training. So it's like this also dread that you're going to have to do this to others, especially as a leader, as a sister training leader.
And kind of an implied threat.
Totally. Yes. So then obviously I get my phone back, and I wasn't going to find anything on it. I wasn't going to turn anyone in. So I obviously returned the phone to the sister missionary whose phone I had. And it was just this uncomfortableness that was like felt like it was a heavy blanket over all of us. And then the APs get up and explain that we will be doing a mission-wide audit the next day. And you need to invite all the missionaries you're over to a meeting in person, which was the first in-person meeting, like, since COVID, as like a zone. And you, as soon as they walk up, you will have a bin, you will take their phones, and the sister training leaders will take a turn doing a training, and then the zone leaders will take a turn doing a training. And during those trainings, the other companionship will be going through the phones, like we just showed you. And you need to make sure the other missionaries do not find out about this, so that they are surprised and will not delete things before this meeting, which it was, I was physically ill after that meeting. Like, nothing else that was said, I didn't hear any of it. I was like, this is so wrong, and it goes against every fiber of my being.
Yeah.
Why?
Because that's that's all the privacy you have. Like, your phone, as much as it's controlled, is like, that's the last piece of you, it feels like. And also, why the hell would we be lying to other missionaries about this? I don't want to be the one put in a position where I have to trick other people and lie to them to get to this meeting where they could be sent home.
Right.
Literally.
Right.
And many missionaries did get sent home after the following day.
That's what Never Mormons have to understand is if you get sent home from your Mormon mission, what is that like?
I mean, so much shame. So much shame. Whether it's obviously from, I'm sure, family and peers and members of the church, but also for yourself. Because the mission, you want to succeed. They push it so hard that, like, you want to return with honor is a very popular phrase that they use. Yeah. So, let alone being sent home, but on top of that, being sent home for, like, pornography or, like, someone just finding movies on your phone, that is so demeaning and hurtful. And I had no desire to be part of that. Yeah. And it was hurtful, and it went against my integrity to do that. But I did it.
Oh, you did it?
Because my mission president said so. And I wasn't going to go against him, especially at that point. So
also this gross policing of others' behaviors. And also the church teaches about free agency and how free agency is really important. And we should be, I mean, the whole war in heaven, according to Mormon theology, Jesus and Satan are up there and Satan's saying, I'll force them to do what's right. And Jesus is saying, we'll give them free agency, right? Yes. Why are you guys laughing?
That was such a huge question of mine, especially as a missionary. It was agency. I was like, why are you telling me why are we teaching that we have agency, like freedom to choose whatever we want? And yet I'm telling these people they can't do what they want. Or like, I can't do what I want. So like, what even is agency? That is fake. Like, or that's not a gift, really, because you're not allowing me to partake in that gift 100%. As you're explaining it.
100%.
So it's,
But then also like the Salem witch trials or the McCarthy hearings, like when you create or freaking like Nazism or like Cold War KGB kind of stuff, you create a culture where you're spying on everyone and snitching back, and you gain favoritism by getting people in trouble. That's a really toxic culture.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
And along with that, my mission president had this term of Christ-like correction that they pushed a lot, which I hated. I have so many entries in my journal where I'm like, this is so wrong. This is so wrong. But it created that system and feeling of fear because everything you were doing was like
Counter.
Yes. And it could be critiqued.
Yes.
And we learned as leaders, as a sister training leader, we would do role plays of how to like critique missionaries in the right way. And we would use like they explained it as a sandwich method where you like compliment, critique, compliment. And I was like, this is psycho. I remember like sitting in training and be like, I do not want to do this. And I know how hard it is to be a missionary. So like, who am I to tell them that they're not doing something right when it's already so difficult?
And I think that's a key point, is just kind of, acknowledging that what missions require are so beyond high expectation, right? Where, every hour is kind of regimented and there's so much already required of you. And then to put this on top of that, I think, that's just super important.
It's a lot
to note.
Yeah.
Well, how is the church teaching its future leaders to self-regulate? Like when they get married, when they go to BYU, when they're adults, are they going to have someone policing their phones? Like, why?
They want you to, because that's at the end of your mission. There's a thing called My Plan, which is a kind of a education course that you do about returning home and like how to stay strong in the church and like goals and like marriage and dating and all these things. And I'm pretty sure that's like an idea that they bring up in that is like having weekly
inventory,
phone audits, inventory. Yes, that's definitely the word they use.
Yeah.
And it made it seem like marriage was like a companionship, like as a missionary, like a missionary companionship. Like
you're
that's what they wanted it to be.
Phone.
Yeah.
Did you? Hey, sweetie, did you look at porn today?
It'd be like, we have a meeting. I would like your phone. Here's my phone.
No, exactly.
All in love, Christ-like correction.
Yeah. I mean, they recommended like having weekly planning sessions, like all the things that missionaries do. And I remember going into like newly married couples' homes and they would have like a whiteboard exactly like ours. Like we had in our apartment where their week was planned out. And like, it was just so weird to see these marriages where it was like, this is literally what I'm living right now.
Right.
Like, why are you still doing this?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And already with what we know about, let's just say within Mormonism, how relationships are kind of constructed, right? Really devoid of emotional intimacy principles. And this just kind of plays into that where you're like, okay, so this is the focus rather than how to communicate, how to be vulnerable, how to, right?
I'll just also say it's my understanding of healthy relationships is you don't want your spouse to be your parent, your mom, your dad, your police officer, your mission president.
Right.
Because like it's hard for them to be a lover if they're a parent, right?
Yes.
It's hard.
It's like, that's not the relationship I want.
Exactly.
That's not the love I want.
Exactly.
You don't want to make passionate love to your mom. Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, or to like a policing person
like,
who is like really having you be accountable for. That's not.
Yeah.
And so when you would when this big mission audit happened, what was the result again?
Many missionaries got sent home. I don't remember the exact number. I think it was above 10 missionaries. And it was just really sad because I had lacked friendships so long that have being on a mission, like I valued those missionaries so deeply and those friendships I had with them. So it was like these people that I loved being sent home and like cared about, and knowing like how hard it would be for them was just so sad.
Yeah.
And I had no like judgment on them on like what they had on their phones or like what they found. I just remember feeling deeply sad for them and scared for them, honestly.
Right.
But I told my mom about that on a P-Day call. And I remember that's one of like the last things I really told her about like what was hard about the mission or was a difficult situation, because she hounded me on like, that's so against you. Like that is not you. And what are you doing? Like, where is your integrity that I know you have? And it was so hurtful because it was like, I didn't want to do this. And I felt so guilty that I had done it and like hurt people and like broken trust with these people that I really, really deeply cared for.
Right.
Wait, did some of the people that get sent home were the ones whose phones you audited?
No, not so. I only audited like the sister missionaries I was over.
Okay.
And none of them. They were all great.
Okay, but you were part of a system.
I was part of a system, and I hated that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this analogy may not totally work, but it reminds me of what happens when, you know, you're in a place like battle with people, or oftentimes in sports when you're in a really rigorous training program with people, and there's this sense of like, whatever, a system there or hardship, or you're really going through, like what's being asked of you is inhumane, right? You're kind of going through something terrible or hard, right?
Yes.
That when something happens to those people around you, it does hit you like it's you in a way, right? If you're not completely just sold over to the system. And so, I'm just feeling it that way, that you're having a sense for, you know, what we're being asked to do feels inhumane. It feels super hard. It feels in some ways like, you know, no one can do it perfectly, right?
Totally.
And so when someone is sent home, you're really feeling for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I like to think I'm an empathetic person in that way. And I hadn't had relationships or friendships like that before.
Right.
So that on top of like, we're all fighting the same cause and like going through the same thing, just added another, like more value to that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So I've heard reports that porn viewing on missions is actually quite high. I mean, is that?
I believe it. And I think it was in our mission as well. And I think that's why my mission president was like so afraid and so like anti-social media, even during COVID, like when a lot of missions were using social media to teach and like share the church, it was only certain missionaries could access social media in that way and use it to teach.
So the mission president will have to decide who's a likely porn viewer or not?
Exactly. I would think so. I think that's probably how he did it. I don't know.
I guess he used the spirit of discernment to decide. And he decided you were not a risk?
I guess so.
Okay. Congratulations.
I made it.
Yeah. Okay. I've heard porn use is really high in missions. The other thing is I have missionaries reaching out to me all the time on Facebook. And I'm wondering, why are missionaries, sorry, did I say mission presidents? I have missionaries reaching out to me all this time on Facebook. And I'm like, why are missionaries on Facebook? And why are they watching Mormon Stories? And why are they able to message me, John DeLynn, of all people? But they do every month.
Yeah, it's because you have access to Facebook. That's like the one social media site you're able to access. And that is what's used since COVID. It was implemented during at the start of COVID to be able to teach and reach out to people that way. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure those missionaries are just finding Mormon Stories on their feed. Just probably pops up because that's what happens when you're focused on.
But then is that not audited so that
I'm sure it is.
The central headquarters that's monitoring your phones can know that they're watching Mormon Stories or direct messaging me?
I'm sure it is. I'm sure they do, but I honestly don't think they pay that much attention.
I mean, it's hard. There's like 60, how many thousand?
Exactly.
50, 60, 70,000 missionaries?
I don't know. It was a lot.
Yeah,
but
it's weird.
And it may be a mark of just desperation, that people reach a point on missions that they're like, what?
I get why the missionaries are reaching out to me. I don't get why they're allowed to reach out to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably
well, maybe they have
the cracks thing.
It also depends on your companion and how like lenient they are.
Yeah.
You have to like feel that out.
Yeah.
So
it's such a weird culture. Like we didn't have to deal with any of this stuff on our missions.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've added a lot, like for good or for worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So how long were you kind of on COVID lockdown in your mission?
We started being able to like get out and teach more in like members' homes and stuff in July. And that's when I got moved from Dana Point to Vista. And I got put with a missionary who had been sent home. She had served in Argentina for quite a while, I think for 8 months. And then COVID hit, she got sent home and she decided to come back out. And they were reassigning missionaries at that point. So like missions were like flooding in the United States. We had like our mission numbers like doubled just because people were getting reassigned.
Reassigned stateside.
Yeah. So I got she'd just come. She was home for like a month before coming out to Newport Beach. And she was just one of the best people. Like she just saved me, especially after companionship I really struggled in and just felt so broken. She was so kind and like so accepting. And like, I just found a really deep friendship with her. And we were in this new area, which had never had elders or had sisters before, had elders for years. And the ward members just like loved us. Mm-hmm. The ward members love sister missionaries. Yeah. It's kind of, it's fun to be a sister missionary because the members just like flock to you. Yeah. And the members there really, really valued us. I remember working really closely with like the mission, the ward mission leader and his wife, and we would watch like general conference in their home, and they would have us over after like we taught lessons throughout the day. And they were just so influential in making me feel like I'm safe again. Like I feel okay as a missionary and I can do this. Nice. But at the same time, my mom started bringing up doubts in our calls about the church.
Before we get to that, let me ask you, you mentioned in your outline getting up the courage to talk to your mission president about your depression. Have you already told us about that?
No, I haven't.
Is that before your mom's?
Yes, that was in either my third or fourth. It was with my companion that I was struggling with.
Okay.
And I realized,
about that?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I was really struggling. Like every morning I would dread the alarm going off. So I was very fearful of like expressing this to my mission president because I felt a lot of guilt and I felt like I should be like enjoying my life, and I don't know.
Enjoying service.
Yes.
Enjoying.
What were the biggest symptoms then? Not wanting to wake up?
Not wanting to wake up. Food was really hard. That companion was very like just weird about food. Like it was my first introduction to like diet culture and like what that was. And I've always had a difficult relationship with food. So like it was even more so. And I think it's also because it's something you can control. Like it's one of the few aspects of your life you can control.
Absolutely.
You're going to say restriction.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was definitely something. My appetite was very low. It was difficult to like control my emotions. Like I would just start crying for no reason. Like I really wouldn't know why. And obviously just the phone calls with my family on P days were just getting like worse and worse and like more exhausting mentally and physically. Like they were just taking it out of me. So that brought me to, it must have been my second transfer with that companion. And we have mission president interviews that are like 10-minute interviews where he meets with us at the beginning of each transfer. 10 minutes, which like, what can you talk about in 10 minutes?
How often?
At the start of every transfer. So every 6-week chunk, you meet with them.
For 10 minutes?
Yeah, for 10 minutes. Yeah. But I walked in there and he was like, how you doing? Like, you look great. Like, you look like you're doing good. Seems like you're doing good. And I was like, I'm actually like really struggling. And I'm kind of feeling like I'm worried I want to go home. Like, I didn't say I want to go home, but I was like, I'm worried I want to go home. And he just sat there and he was like, can I be honest with you? And of course I'm like, yes, like, please just tell me the answer to my problems. And he just looked me in the eyes and was like, you are being prideful. Like, you are prideful and you need to lose yourself. Like, you need to let go of wanting to go home, of like these worldly things, and you need to like be more in with missionary life. Like, you need to stop worrying about family and about how you're feeling. And like, he just put it back on me. He shamed me, really. So I walked out of that interview angry. That was like the first time on my mission where I was like, I'm angry. Like, he should not have told me that. But then after like a little bit, it was like, yeah, of course I'm prideful. Like, that is why I'm feeling this way, because every time I talk with my family, this is how I feel. Like, every time those things that are familiar and like of the world, they are bringing up those feelings. So yeah, I am prideful. I'm thinking of myself in these moments. So.
Oh, I see. So
Yeah.
in that way, that connection to self is the shameful part.
Yes.
Your link to yourself and your experience is the shameful part.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And instead of like realizing that was really harmful and toxic thing to say to someone who's experiencing depression symptoms, I just buckled down and like went
That's right.
more in and like experienced more of that loss of self.
When you were telling us that, I saw tears well up. What were you feeling as you were telling us his reaction to you? What were you feeling? I mean, you said anger, but what
totally.
What were you?
Very hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, every time. That's like, it's interesting because I had a lot of other like kind of more traumatic things happen on my mission, but for some reason that experience was like soul destroying. Like, it was like, I cannot be me. Like, I'm not allowed to want things. God doesn't want me to want things. He wants me to just want him.
Right.
And you just said God.
Yeah. Yeah. Because my mission president was talking for God in my eyes. And going on a mission, I loved who I was. Like, I really valued how independent I was and like how I loved being creative and like accepting of people. But it was in that moment where it's like, I have to change. Like, I guess God wants me to change to be this robot that I didn't want to become. But I guess that's what I have to do to have a successful mission and be successful in his eyes.
And I'm going to never stop saying this. I'm generally a free speech person, but to say that you speak for God to somebody else for them should be illegal because it's too much power.
I agree. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And it's just, it leads to coercion and abuse.
And I try to hold that he was doing what he was told he was supposed to be doing. Like, he's a victim of the system, but also holding that it was not okay what he did. And it was extremely hurtful, extremely traumatic. And it hurt not only me, but like my family too. So
it hurt your family, that response?
Well, I think further down the line.
Okay.
Yeah. But my mission as a whole. Yeah. Yeah.
So powerful. And I think in that moment too, I don't know, I'm feeling from you this almost last shred of hope, like you're going saying, it feels like help me. Can you help me? And that his response is just not only shaming, but also just like, you're not allowed to have needs. Like, get over it, erase yourself. You're not allowed, which I can just think about that becoming a part of you and something that would be hard later on to really work through.
Yeah.
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 So
Thank you.
sorry.
And then you talk about your mission president's relationship to your therapist. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I realized pretty quickly and heard from other missionaries as well that like my mission therapist was having conversations with my mission president and his wife about what I was saying to her and like what I was going through. I don't think like specifics, but definitely like what I was expressing to her and like my struggles.
So breaking confidentiality.
Yes.
And
I just have to say, like, week one, you know, as a therapist, you're trained to never violate client confidentiality. That's like the first, in the first time you meet with a client, you say everything we say is between us. But with the exception of like if you're going to kill yourself or harm somebody else.
Totally.
But other than that, and you're telling me that your mission president was freely communicating with your therapist and vice versa.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed that way.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I wasn't called into a leadership position until later in my mission. I probably would have gotten called sooner.
And how can you have an effective engagement with a therapist if you're worried that if you're honest with your therapist, it'll affect your leadership status as a missionary?
It's all so intertwined and like just this fear, like this constant fear and anxiety of like everyone around me is just like watching me and like knows my deepest secrets. It kind of feels. So it's like, yeah, I can't even be fully honest with her, even though I tried my best to do that because it was such an outlet for me. Someone who felt unbiased in my situation, even though that's not how it was, but that's how it felt in that moment. And I valued her a lot. Mm-hmm. But I now know, of course, like that shouldn't be happening at all.
No.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, that sense of loss of control over your own situation is just, it's so coming through in your story. And that these touch points of people who could have helped in the end, their responses to you make you more fearful, more afraid, and they have such power over you in determining something as like, pivotal as being sent home.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, I agree.
So my question for you is just kind of walking out of that meeting that you had with your mission president and then kind of moving forward from there. How would you talk about your relationship with that mission president? And did that change you in the way that you related to your mission president?
For sure. I think that moment of like anger stuck with me like deep down, but ultimately taking his advice as God's word for me, like tighten that relationship and tighten my hold to everything he said. Even if it did feel wrong, like Christ-like correction was a huge deal for me. I really hated that. And I hated how it made me feel and how it made others feel. And when he would push that anger would come back up. But ultimately, I just trusted him more because he was honest with me.
That's right. So it was like you would have the anger piece, but you would have the obedience response.
Yes.
To it.
For sure.
And listening to him like he had the truth about you.
Yes. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. That just adds insult to injury, basically.
Yeah. And it kept going.
Yeah.
It just, because in that transfer with my she's still, I treasure her as a friend, in Vista, is my mom the relationship with my mom started splintering
Okay, yeah.
as she explained these doubts.
Yeah, so how was that?
church.
What was that like? What's it like for a missionary to have their mom call and say, I'm doubting the church?
Heavy.
Do you want to tell us about that call? Tell us about that call.
Well, it was a number of calls of just like her starting to bring up these concerns, and like I can't remember if she asked to be released out of the young women's presidency or not. But I'm pretty sure she did, and it was like so concerning to me because I had left these parents who I wouldn't say worship, but like looked up to in every sense of like being good members of the church. And leaving the church was never even an option that came into my mind. Like, it was never a thought. So it was very concerning. And with that came a lot of guilt because I knew I had been expressing the struggles I was having as a missionary. I knew I had told her about like my struggles with the temple, like all these things I was putting back on myself. Like I was the reason why she was struggling. So there was a lot of guilt. And also like, how much should I not tell her? But also, how can I live not telling someone what I'm feeling in like an honest way? So it was okay. And then my next transfer, I got moved. We got taken out of that area, which was like so heartbreaking. It was just it was a terrible time because I loved my companion. She was just so wonderful, and just finally like someone I connected with, and like we taught well together, and we were really successful in that area. And then they took us out and put elders back in. And first of all, the ward was like so upset. But also, we were just like destroyed with that loss of a relationship. And my mission president also had the rule of once you leave an area, you can no longer talk to any of the people you taught. You cannot talk to companions. Like, you're cut off from all those people until you get home from your mission.
Oh, I see.
So it was like a complete loss of relationships.
Right.
So when these losses were happening, it was like I held tighter to these calls on Monday because it was like someone familiar, someone who knew me.
Yes, and something regular, something consistent
Yes.
that stayed the same. Yes.
For sure. Yeah. So then my next transfer, I stayed in the Vista zone, but moved to a different ward with a new companion who I knew because she was in our zone, and she was just awesome too. I feel very fortunate in all my companions. They were just wonderful people who I really, really love and care about, even still. But that is the transfer when I found my mom told me that she wasn't going back to church. And I remember we had a little like deck or porch outside of our apartment. It was a pretty nice apartment. And I was just talking to her, and she just said, I'm so sorry, but I don't think I'm going to be going back to church. And it was another one of those moments that was just like shattering. And I just obviously started sobbing, and she was apologizing, and it's like, it's okay. Like, do what's best for you. And I think I ended the call pretty quickly after she said that.
Did you want to ask her why? Did you have any interest?
I did not want to know why. But in some ways, I knew why, because it was me. Like, it felt like me. It was my experience that caused her to leave. So it was like so much guilt.
Your experience?
Because I was explaining all these struggles with being a missionary and the church involved with that. Like, why is my mission president telling us to do all these weird things and like all these rules, and like how much she was seeing how much damage was being done to me.
So you were thinking my sharing my mission
is causing her to leave.
Caused her to leave, which almost has an overlay. Did it with the mission president being like, you're selfish.
Exactly.
You're selfish.
So it was so knit together.
Yeah.
Oh, so you can't just have a horrible experience on your mission. Now your horrible experience is ruining other people's eternal salvation.
Exactly. Well, I'm supposed to be like saving people and like bringing them to the church.
Oh, that's just so much to hold.
Yeah. So I remember after that call, I just like sat in the bathroom, turned the shower on, like sobbed, like on the floor of our bathroom for like hours, like at least 2 or 3 hours. I was just like sobbing, and I was like, like praying to God and like so angry. Like, why in the world would you do this to me, to like my family that I care so deeply about? And I was just so broken and hurt. And I ended up asking my mission president if I could call him and talk to him on that P day. And I explained like my mom is leaving the church and I don't know how to function. Like I think I need to go home. And he was like, well, I'm going to put you in contact with my freshman year seminary teacher, like with my family friend. And so I was able to talk to him. And it's interesting, his mom also left the church. So he had that same experience as I did.
Oh,
in
interesting.
A way.
Okay.
So it was really helpful to be able to talk to him and like be like, it's going to be okay. Like, you'll still have a relationship. It'll be okay. But yeah, and then just trying to find ways to keep being a missionary. It really just took like shoving all the feelings down and like avoiding it to move forward. But that conversation with him was really helpful, and I'm grateful my mission president did put me in contact with him because that was really helpful. But also it was reinforced that I needed to stay very strongly because at that point I started bringing up to my therapist that I wanted to go home. Like, I think I need to be there for my family. Like, this seems like a really tough situation, and I want to be there for my siblings and, like, my dad and my mom. Like, I just want to be home. And they're like, well, what are you going to do if you go home? And I was like, be with my family? Like, I don't know, love them? And they're like, you're doing that from here. So, like, why would you go home? So, and I was so, like, unable to advocate for myself at that point. That was like, okay, like, I can't fight this. I can't fight you telling me not to go home. So I'm just going to keep it going.
Did your mission president give you any advice about how to deal with your parents losing their faith?
Well, he questioned my mom's mental health multiple times. She was like, is she like okay? Does she like need like mental help? And that was like so confusing to me because first of all, he doesn't know my mom.
Right.
And
so it's implied.
Yes.
That having a struggle or leaving
was tied with like mental health.
Mental stability.
Yeah. So I just thought that was a weird comparison. I don't remember really getting any advice at that point besides like, don't talk to your mom about church stuff.
Okay.
And then, yeah.
So he's basically creating distance between you and your family and your parents, which is another classic tactic of a high demand religion or cult is alienation from family.
Yes.
And that's the beginning of psychological alienation, I'm guessing, from your parents.
Totally. Yes. That was definitely the start of like a break of trust and a shift in how we interacted with each other.
Is she crazy? Don't ask her why.
Yeah, it's like,
Don't
is she unwell?
Yeah.
Is your mom unwell?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I trust my mission president.
Right.
So it's like,
because it's God.
Of course he must know.
Because he's basically representing God.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's way too much power.
It's too much.
Yeah.
Especially for someone like him who's knows how to like work a system.
Pull the levers.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did that affect your calls to your mom or dad?
You could see it was I would just say it was uncomfortable. I didn't know how to like talk to my mom, which was so weird because we'd been so close my whole life. But it was like now she's like against the church, which is like the worst of the worst. Like, how is that even possible? But she's my mom and I love her. So I need to trust that she's doing what's best for her. So it was this back and forth. I go back to my journal writings a lot because that's how I remember things during this time because it was just so traumatic. But I just shifted between like trusting her decision and also like, why is she doing this? And like, I can't talk to her about these things anymore. Like, I'm alone. I'm completely alone in my experience now. There's no one I can like be honest and open to.
Right, because those Monday phone calls or those, was it Monday?
Monday, preparation day.
Phone calls were your tie to consistency and to people who knew you.
Yes.
And
very
now
much
you're
so.
being told you
Don't do
can't,
that.
yes, or you have to really, really restrict those. And it's also implied that the people you love most are not
Yes.
safe for you right now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I just have to say, like, in any other context, specifically not religious, let's just say you love Teslas and you convince someone else you love to drive a Tesla. And then you find out Teslas explode and, kill and maim the people inside. I'm making this up. And you say, hey, I convinced you to buy a Tesla, but I just found something out that's lethal. Like the only response from the other person should be what? Like, tell me everything.
Yeah.
I don't want to die. But in the case of religion, this is your mom, the person you love and trust most. And when she tells you, this isn't right, there's problems here. Me of all people, it's not, I don't think this is good. Your reaction is the opposite. I don't want to hear. Like there's no world where that makes sense or is healthy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
It should be if you're in a healthy organization, your response should be, tell me everything. Yes. I need to know everything.
Warn me. Like, let me know what you know.
Yeah.
Like, knowledge is power in that situation.
Absolutely.
But instead, because at that point, the church was everything. Like, you don't have anything else besides the church. So you love it completely and fully. And it's your identity at that point. It was my identity at that point. So if she would say anything negative about the church, it was like attack on me.
Yeah.
Now that she left. Like before that point, and we were like expressing doubts, it was fine.
Yeah.
Like we were just validating each other and it was comforting. But then she left and it's like a whole shift.
Yeah.
Which she sent me a few emails containing like things about the church that she had found out, like Joseph Smith's multiple vision accounts.
First vision accounts,
where there's multiple accounts rather than just the one we memorize and share almost every day to people
the
that we
1838
meet.
account.
Yeah.
It's way different than the 1832 account.
Exactly, which I had no idea, but I was like, oh, I knew that already. That's what I told her. And I didn't even read these emails because I would just see like, it just felt anti-Mormon.
Yeah, threat.
Yes. So I was like, I'm not reading that. And then also she sent me like Stephen Hassan's bite model. And she was like, I just see so many similarities between your mission and this model. And being like, why would you send me this? Because it felt like a threat, like an attack on me and my experience. And I was giving everything, like my whole soul to this effort.
So when a parent who's losing or lost their faith wants to provide information to the missionary to help them see it too, the reaction for you as a missionary was?
Don't tell me. Or like, I don't know, just there's just so much uncomfortableness with
discomfort.
Discomfort.
Yeah.
Like,
So it wasn't helpful to you.
It's just so difficult to know because I'm very much a perfectionist and rule follower. So it was like I wouldn't have been able to leave my mission. Even if they hadn't left the church and I was miserable, and I was already miserable, I wouldn't have left because I wanted to do the right thing. And the right thing felt like staying. So them telling me made it a lot more difficult, but I don't know the other side. So it could have been really difficult coming home and realizing you didn't tell me like you left like 8 months ago.
Yeah.
Like that is really damaging as well, which happened with my dad, like finding out my dad had left the church as well. Mm-hmm. They told me a few months after he had stopped going, and that was really hurtful.
Because from a parent's perspective, if let's just say you were to get hurt on your mission because people got shot, you were depressed, like how could a parent live with themselves knowing that you got hurt on your mission when they might have been able to give you information that might have led you to not stay and get hurt?
Well,
like it's hard.
Can we just say that's what happened?
Yes. And
Because that's why Ryan's here. Ryan's here saying it harmed me.
Right.
So Ryan's mom is literally trying to do the thing to say, life preserver to you.
SOS.
Get out now. We love you. You don't need to do it, by the way.
Yeah.
But then sometimes that can create the backfire effect where the missionary is more committed to staying now.
Which happened to me.
That's the worst.
But I mean, it was so difficult at the time, but looking back, I'm like, it makes so much sense why she would do that.
Absolutely.
I mean, anyone who loves someone and wants to save them from something that's harming them wants to warn them
wants
of what's
to try.
Yes.
It may not work, but there are moments where you have to try to live with yourself. You have to know.
For sure.
I did all that I could.
Yeah.
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 And then the system is the thing that makes this situation impossible.
Totally.
Just absolutely, yeah.
Yes. Agreed.
Oh my gosh.
Agreed.
I'm so sorry for you and for your parents.
Yeah, me too.
So then there's the point in your outline where you discover there's abuse going on. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I was a sister training leader at that point, and being called as a sister training leader was like, oh, because yes, like amazing. Because I now got to work with so many missionaries and like love more missionaries and create more friendships, and also realize like other people were struggling too. I wasn't the only one.
Right.
And being able to like help people through those struggles, and like even just like listening to them and validating their experience was so empowering for me. And it allowed me to like feel comfortable as a missionary. And also your workload like triples when you become a sister training leader. You have meetings until like 10 p.m. every night. Oh. Like, so it's like you have no time to think about anything or like slow down, which is some ways really harmful, but in other ways it was really helpful because I didn't have to face any of the things I was like experiencing at the time. So it was my second transfer being a sister training leader, and I was with another companion who I just really value, and she was just really spectacular. And we were helping this lady work on her like nonprofit organization, which already was pretty sketchy. She like helped save children, like babies that weren't wanted, but like find homes for them in this weird way. And it just probably wasn't the safest place for us to be. But as a missionary, any moment where you can just like help people and not have to talk about the church was like God sent. Like it was like a moment of relaxing, just letting them talk. And she was a talker. Like she nonstop talked. So it was like we could just shut off our brains and like smile and nod and just do whatever she was telling us to do. But pretty quickly into like providing service for her, we recognized that there was about 5 children living in the home with their grandma. And then she also the woman who we were helping lived there. And the children would never talk to us. Like they were just always felt very afraid of just us, which felt weird because children typically like really loved us and our energy, and like we were just always very loving. But one of the times we went in and the grandma took the children into like a back room, and we just heard like screaming and like crying and like things being thrown, and it was like so scary. So we just left, and we like got shook up pretty bad, but also we were like, some people react differently to like, I don't know, reprehending children. Doesn't feel right, but like whatever. And then we roped in some elders one time to help this woman who owned the organization to move things into like a separate office. And while we were helping her move, we ended up going into the garage, which was a place she like never let us go. And it was like all the good feelings within me like disappeared. And it was like just this terrible, heavy feeling. And we went in there and there was like these white, obviously like handmade built walls and like these padlocked doors on either side. And for some reason we had to go into one of the rooms to like grab something. And we opened the door and it was just like graffiti covering this whole room. And then this dirty white mattress like sitting in the middle of the floor with like kind of just comforter strewn like pillows all over the place, and like these weird walls and these dark drawings like all over. And they weren't like framed, they were like graffiti, like someone had like spray painted on the walls, and it was dark, like no windows, nothing. And it was just so scary and alarming, and it felt like something wrong had happened there, like, or was happening there, like. And obviously as a missionary, I think there is like a level of paranoia that you have just because you're so on edge all the time. But the elders and my companion and I were like, something's really bad here. So we quickly left. We were like, we have to go, we have a lesson. And me and my companion went to the church building, and we were like, we need to call president and like tell them. Because we feel like the police should go there and like check on these kids. Just like, even if it's just an anonymous call, like just like go have a welfare check for them. And we called him, and he right away was like, do not call the police. We don't want you getting involved with any investigations or anything like that. And I was just like, well, what about like an anonymous call? Can't you just be like, I don't want anything part, but I just feel like these kids need to be checked up on. And he was like, no, do not call the police. Like, the leaders of the church have told us not, for missionaries not to contact the police. And
even if they know that children's safety is in danger.
Yes. Which he didn't say specifically those words, but obviously that's what he was implying. Yeah. And it just, I had this sinking feeling of just like, these kids, like, how can I just, even if like everything's okay in a sense, like I just feel so deeply that something is wrong. And I would just feel so much better if someone like went and checked on them, and like, because something's off with that house. And he was like, just let it go, like move on. And then a couple weeks later, I was still just feeling like so scared for these kids. Like I was like, I have to play my part in this. Like, I can't just sit back and like let something happen to people I am concerned about. So I brought it up in a mission president interview. And then once again, I was met with like, you're prideful and you need to just like let it go. Like, God will take care of them is really the excuse that I got told. So, yeah. Yeah, I was also really hurtful and just like denying standing for what I believed in as like an individual.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Ethics alone.
Yes.
Not religion based, but just human to human.
Yeah.
And that's one thing when you're experiencing it. It's another if you understand the system-wide problem the Mormon Church has of protecting abusers and silencing victims and advising family members of victims to never report to the police. It's just another data point that we have that's the church's modus operandi.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So you got a concussion.
I did. And that was the weekend before I found out my whole family had left the church. So the concussion I got, we were like, me and us and some elders were part of like a youth activity, a mutual activity, where the young men and young women are together like playing sports. So we were just playing like a game with like a soccer ball, and I got hit directly like head on by one of the elders with the soccer ball, and it like knocked me down on the floor. And it wasn't a severe concussion, but it definitely was a concussion. And we called the nurse, the mission nurse, and she was like, don't go to the doctor, just rest. What is rest as a missionary? Like, there's no rest as a missionary.
She said, don't go to the doctor?
Don't go to the doctor.
What the heck?
Yeah. And
that's been well reported as just Mormon missions not providing adequate medical care for their missionaries.
yeah. And as a missionary, you're not in the place to advocate for yourself in that way.
You don't even
you're
have transportation usually.
Exactly. And you're like cars tracked. So they have like this device called a Tiwi that like sits in your dashboard.
If you have a car, by the way.
If you do have a car,
Right.
which I was fortunate enough in a mission where everyone had a car.
Yeah.
Which like tracks your speed. It tells you if you're speeding. It's like, check your speed is what you hear if you go above the speed limit. So they know where you're at all times. I don't think they like check it like frequently. Maybe they do, but they know where you're at all times. So, and also in a situation like that, you're trusting them to know what's best for you. Like it's a mission nurse.
You're assuming that they care.
Yes.
That there is care present.
Yes.
But they're probably motivated to keep costs down.
Probably.
Right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's their motivation.
How did the concussion impact you?
Massive headaches and just like out of it for the next few days. Anytime I could lay down, I would be like laying down. But at that point, my mission president had banned naps. So like we could not take naps. Yeah.
Did he ban Christmas?
Yeah. No, seriously. Pretty much.
The level of detail.
Yeah.
So like if you're out tracting all day and then you need to go home and just take a little nap.
No naps.
Over lunch.
Yeah, no naps.
Okay.
Even during lunchtime or like dinner time or because I was doing that at the start of my mission because you're exhausted. I mean, you're constantly.
Because you wake up at
6:30.
6:30, and then how long is your day?
So 6:30 to 10:30 every day.
At night?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So 16 hour days.
16 hours. Yeah.
Julia's saying even Jesus took naps.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Julia.
Julia knows. Julia knows.
Yeah, I was pretty pissed when he did that. But so I was like resting, but also would feel bad about like taking a nap.
This guy sounds like a Nazi a little bit.
And you have a concussion.
Yes. So they were like,
So
stay out of
maybe
the
a nap?
sun. But it was like a rule to go on P days to like go do an activity with like your district, the missionaries in your area. And obviously that's typically means sports activities. So I would just be like I was sitting in the sun and I just had like this raging headache. Like my head was just like pounding. But I obviously had a concussion, but there's no way to like take care of yourself. There's no space for that. Even though my companion, I was in a trio at that time and they were so like wanted to help me in any way they could.
But they have to conform to the rules
Exactly.
too. So limited. And so that was on your P day, but that's your one free day.
Yes. So
But-
P days are planned as well. So they're really not a free day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the day you clean your apartment. You have to go to an activity with your district.
So you have to go to an activity on your P day.
Yeah.
It's not even optional.
Yeah, I hated it. Because I was like, well, that's like my one day. I could just like sit down. I just want to sit
Yes.
down.
I didn't have that.
Really?
No. You could do what you wanted on
Interesting.
P-Day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had to do that. And then grocery store, which you have to go to the grocery store because you're out of groceries and your
Right.
card only gets recharged every week. And then you have your phone call with your family. So then that's pretty much the day because it ends at 6 p.m.
Got it. Wow.
So there's really no rest whatsoever.
Yep.
And then so I got the concussion on a Saturday, and then that P day, I called my family, and I think my mom was mentioning like they were thinking about moving, and like some changes had happened, and they were just kind of feeling like maybe it's time to move, and I was like, what? And I had this idea pop into my mind that I needed to ask, like, if my dad had left the church. And so I asked, I was like, well, has, like, dad left the church? And my mom just, like, nodded, and it was like, yeah, he left a little bit ago. And I was like, well, what about, like, my siblings? And it was also like, they're not attending church anymore either. And it was just it felt like complete and utter abandonment.
Yeah.
Like, I was completely alone at that point. And I just shattered. Like, I couldn't function for about 3 days after that. It was 6:00, ended the call. After my mom just, like, profusely apologizing and, like, are you okay? Like, can we do something for you? And as a missionary, you can't tell your parents where you live or, like, where your exact location is. So there's no way that you can help your child, really. And I had a concussion. I was sobbing, and I ended the call and just, like, we were in the chapel, and I just fell onto the chapel floor and couldn't function. And I just sobbed. And my companions were like, what? Are you okay? Like, can we help? Like, what is wrong? What happened? I was just like, my family isn't in the church anymore. And it was like I felt so broken and alone, like completely and utterly alone. And they, like, somehow got me into the car and, like, drove me back to the apartment. And I just laid in bed, like, sobbing. And they called the therapist for, like, an emergency call and was like, she needs help. And I barely said a word to her. I think mostly my companions spoke to her for me. But then obviously my mission president called because he found out because my companions knew. And he was like, we're going to get you in contact with, like, your family friends, the people, like, my seminary teacher. And it was just so hurtful. And it was hard because I didn't blame my family. Like, I trusted that they were doing, like, what was right for them. But at the same time, I felt like I had led them out of the church and they were denying me the heaven that they had taught me. And, like, yeah. It was just, like, denying everything I had given my whole life to and was giving everything to at that time.
That's right. Yes, that you were in many ways having this, moments, it sounds like, of connection with maybe companions, but overall this being, just such a challenging experience for you, so that you were likely looking toward the benefit of, like, well, maybe my family will be saved, or maybe this will help in not in this life, not in this moment, but maybe in the future, right? And so in that moment, it's like, nope, not even in the future. And then you're like, why am I doing this?
Literally.
Why am I here?
But also it's like
everything I've sacrificed for.
Who I am at that point. So it's like, you're denying me as a person. And at the same time realizing, wow, I don't want to go to heaven without my family. And also, I don't want to be here. And also, I don't want to be home. So, like, there's no place for me. And that's where I had suicidal ideation start popping up, like, for the first time in my whole life. So it was just very dark. And my mission president, it felt like a gift that he was, like, able to fit me in on his schedule to, like, meet with him. But I met with him and he just was, like, apologizing, of course, but he was also like, well, you can make your own family when you get back, like, get married, have kids, like, and I was like, I don't want that. I just sat there like, that's not what I want. And just kind of, like, nodded and agreed and tried my best to, like, function. But I mean,
What was the mission president's response to your suicidal ideation?
I didn't tell him, or I didn't tell anyone on my mission, even my family. Like, I kept that to myself for sure.
Why?
But I was afraid to tell them. And I think I was afraid to even like feel that fully. But it was a constant battle in my mind of like, I should just end it. Like, what's the point of even of living, which is just so terrible. But it was how I felt in that moment.
Yeah.
Like there should be a mission protocol. If you ever feel like you want to die, pull the ripcord, go home.
Totally.
Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. You go home with honor. There will be no judgment. You'll return with honor. You just do not pass go.
Hands down.
Right?
Yeah. But I was told by my mission president, like, I was prideful for being unhappy.
Yeah,
and like
that it's on
experiencing
you.
depression at the beginning of my mission. So it was like going back to that and like, well, he's just going to blame me. It's going to be a me issue. So I don't trust to tell him. I don't trust him to like take care of me. And I'm also afraid that like I'm going to get damaged more by what he says.
Yeah, so it's sort of like what I hear you saying too, it's so powerful, is I don't belong here. Like it's not safe here. And now I'm feeling like I don't belong at home.
Yes.
So like there is no place for me. There is no place for me to go. So why would you like pull the ripcord where you're like, that's not a place I feel safe going either, because in part they've created, a place where you can't really trust your family either.
Yeah.
And my good friend told me that suicidality, I mean, I've studied psychology, but my psychiatrist friend told me once, just made it really clear, people start to feel suicidal when they feel like they have no way out.
And that's how it felt.
Yeah.
And that's when my mission president started advising me to stop contact with my family. They're like, don't call them on P days. Like, you need to like cut them out of your life, really, is what it felt like. Like he even told me like, don't go home to them. Like fly home somewhere else.
When you end your mission.
Yes. Like started making plans for me to like not see my family when I got back. He was like, are your grandparents still members of the church? And they were, and they played a part in more separation from my family, and just the way they're like, yeah, you can just stay with us. Like, and also played into like, your family's missing out on these blessings and like, you need to save them. And now it's your job to like get everyone back to heaven. And like, I was just being told from these people I trusted to care for me and care about my experience and what I was feeling, telling me to do these things that shocked me. I was like, how in the world am I not going to go home to my family? That's what I've been looking forward to since day one.
Alive, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But now it's like there's no family. It felt like there was no family to go back to, which is silly because obviously they love me and like care about me.
More than he does.
Yes, hands down. But
More than the church does.
Yes.
But that's the power, I think, of, an isolated environment with a lot of control and a power dynamic and a certain aspect of perceived survival at risk, right?
Agreed.
That you're like, I have to do what I have to do. I have to do anything they say. I have to do,
Yeah. I mean, you're like drowning in what they're telling you. Like there's no other way out. Yeah. Yeah.
So what happened?
I had some health issues, more health issues. The major one was I had an ovarian cyst burst, which is fascinating because one of my companions almost died from that and like had to be sent home for a month to like receive surgery a year prior to me being her companion. And it's one of like the worst pains imaginable. It's like you're boiling from like the inside out, and it's like a knife is like being you're being stabbed. Like, it is such a terrible pain.
Does it bleed? Is that how you know it happened?
No, it doesn't bleed. So I know that it was an ovarian cyst because I had another one rupture a year after my mission, and it was the same experience, same pain.
So just stabbing pain.
Yeah, just stabbing, extreme pain, like not able to get off the floor. And I started having that pain when I was at a member's home. So I was like kind of nudging my companion, like, we gotta like go because I'm in a lot of pain. So just like finish teaching the lesson, of course, because members come first. And then we like quickly left, and I was like, I gotta go home. Like I'm in extreme pain. Like it hurts. Every step is like agonizing. And then we got to our apartment. I just laid on the floor in a ball, and I was like, I had a heating pad that I brought with me, and I was just like hugging that. And we called the nurse, the mission nurse, and she said, well, just wait it out, see if it gets any worse. Just want to make sure it's like not appendicitis, but don't go to the doctor. Just call me if it gets worse. And at that point, I have no strength to like fight what anyone else is telling me to do. So
the
I just laid
mission
there.
medical person tells you not to go to a doctor.
Yes.
When you have an ovarian cyst rupture.
Yes. And an extreme, like the worst pain I've ever been in. And it just kept getting worse and worse. But I'm also like, does that meet the threshold? And growing up in a big family, it's like you kind of, obviously you don't, if something can be fixed at home, like it's going to get fixed at home. So it was, I just trusted her to know what was best. She's a nurse. So, but I just laid there. Like she called back, I think like 2 hours later, and I was like, yeah, it's worse. And she's like, just keep waiting out. I think it'll pass. If it has to like switch sides, because I think with appendicitis, the pain moves. But I just laid there, and all night I didn't sleep really, maybe a few hours, but I would just lay in the shower and like scalding hot water, just like ease the pain. Because ibuprofen wasn't touching it. Like it was just agonizing. And well, we got an extra hour to sleep in the next morning. That's all we got. I guess so I was able to sleep until 7:30 instead of 6:30.
Who made that decision?
The nurse.
She got to decide how long you could sleep in.
Yeah. And the pain goes away after a certain amount of time with ovarian cysts. So by the morning, I was sore, but like no longer in pain. And we just went to work like normal.
Wow.
So it was just another, and I wasn't able to call my family. Like I wanted my mom's help so bad.
Yeah.
Because it's like you just, again, feel so lonely and like it's so painful. And you want someone who like knows you and like can take care of you. But obviously my companion doesn't know what to do. And like we're just listening to what we're being told. So
you didn't call her because it wasn't P-Day, or because you didn't have permission, or because she had left the church?
Because it wasn't P-Day.
Okay.
Yeah, is the main thing. I would have called her if it was P-Day.
Right.
I don't know. She was a apostate.
That's true. Maybe. I was still calling though. That was something I mean, every time I would see my mission president after my family left, he would be like, well, have you called them? Are you calling them? Like, are you talking to them? Or have you like stuck to our goal of not calling? Jeez. And it was just like a constant guilt of like not following through with the goal I'd set with him, but also realizing like I needed to talk to my family. Like I wasn't not going to talk to them, but I did get to the point where he like agonized me. He just asked me enough about not calling my family that I didn't call them for a P-Day or maybe 2. And it was the worst. I mean, that damaged my relationship with my family just a lot. Like cut deep.
Julia's fact checking. She sent me a note that says from Johns Hopkins Medicine, if an infected cyst ruptures, it can trigger sepsis, a life-threatening immune response to harmful bacteria. So that's what you were facing.
Yes.
And the church said, don't go to a doctor.
Yeah. And I had a companion who almost like died and did get sent home and had to have surgery because that happened to her.
Right.
And the only reason she got taken to the hospital is because she passed out of the pain, which happened to me the second time I had an ovarian cyst rupture.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's crazy.
So what I'm feeling so much for you is you're having these moments where you truly need help and you're reaching out in the way that you can for help and you're just getting no care.
Yeah.
It's like radio silence. Like repeated though.
Over and over again.
Yes.
And it's a big trigger for me now. It's
I
like
bet.
anytime I feel abandoned, it's like breakdown, like mental panic and stress and emotion. Just it's a very much a trigger for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in these moments too, I would just point out, as a mother, when your child has offered themselves up, this sense of just real disregard for the value of your life.
Yes. Yes.
It's just horrific.
And it was realizing like they don't care. They actually don't care about me.
They don't care. It's about the use of you.
Yeah.
Not about the care of you.
Yeah. But also I was being told that the church needed me. Like I was someone who the church needed because I had this experience. So it's that idea of like God gives the worst trials to those he trusts more. And that is such a hurtful and damaging teaching because it allows you to stay in situations that are traumatic and toxic.
Yeah.
And be okay with horrible things happening to you.
Yeah, and it also keeps you, it's about the use in the end.
Totally.
Because anyone who's basically having you disregard your own experience, your own harm, your own well-being wants to control you. And why do they want to control you? Usually it's so they can use you.
Totally.
In some way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how much longer did the mission last and how did it end?
A few more, I think it was like about one more transfer after that happened. And I was so terrified to go home. Like I was so scared because of all the things I had been told. And like, I was surrounded by the church 24/7 for the past year and a half. So it was like going home, let alone my family moved to like a whole different city during my mission. So it's like, I knew no one. I wasn't even able to say goodbye to like the home I'd grown up in and the people I loved, and they had moved to this whole different area. And also they were no longer supporting what I had been taught my whole life and what I had experienced before I left on my mission from them. And it was scary.
And why were your parents moving?
They wanted to get away from everyone we knew within the church because it was like we were such a big part of the community. Everyone knew us. Everyone knew we were members. And my mom especially had a very traumatic kind of experience leaving the church, especially with the people who loved us and loved our family. So I think leaving for them was like getting away from all that, which makes perfect sense to me. But it was really difficult.
The timing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a sign of a high demand religion or cult if you feel like you have to move homes as a way to stay healthy or safe after you've left a church.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's common.
Agree.
Margie and I experienced that. We tried to stay 2 years after my excommunication. It wasn't healthy for us to stay.
Yeah. It's kind of scary.
Yeah.
And it was just such a different home than what I knew before. It was like whole new people, it felt like. So
Did you return with honor? Did the mission president make you feel good at the end?
oh yeah. I mean, I loved the missionaries in my mission. Like
Yeah.
I felt so loved. I had these deep friendships that I had with these people I'd connect with, companions and just missionaries I'd been over as a sister training leader. And
Was it 18 months total?
18 months,
You
yeah.
did the full 18
yeah,
months.
I started January 2020 and then got home at the beginning of June 2021.
Did your mission president give you any parting advice?
Start dating and move in with your grandparents. It's pretty much the sentiment I got. And also avoid talking about the church with your family. At all costs, avoid talking about the church with your family.
And again, that's a red flag. High demand religions or cults want to limit the information you receive, especially from critics or people who are knowledgeable, so they can limit your thoughts or your questions or doubts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
He made me feel like I was a successful missionary, though. Like I felt like I'd done my job and I'd been successful and I'd baptized 5 people and I felt successful as a missionary and in the church.
So the church is your home now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I remember in the Denver airport, which is where my family picked me up, you go up escalators to meet with the people who are there waiting for you. And all I felt when I went up those stairs and saw them was like complete and utter love. Like, which was so confusing because I was so scared to see them again. And it was an overwhelming sense of like relief and just love. Like, we love each other. Like, the love is still there.
Yeah.
And all these things that I was being told about, like, just about my family being harmful and like, it was just untrue. Like, realizing they're the same people that love me.
So did you feel like there was kind of an inner recognition that went on?
For sure. Yeah. And I think that was, it was a short moment of time though, because then I buckled down back into the church.
Defenses.
Yes. So it felt so good to be home. But the first moment in time when I realized, oh, they're really not part of the church anymore was when I got released in like the stake president's home of the new ward area they were in. And I bore my testimony to them because that's what you do before you like get released. So like my siblings were there, my parents were there, and I like bore my testimony to them. And it was like so heartfelt. And like my parents were crying and my siblings were all just like staring down at the floor, and I could tell they were really uncomfortable, and I was uncomfortable because I was like, oh my God, like they aren't part of the church anymore. And I'm seeing it, I'm witnessing it in person. And we got in the car afterwards and it was just silent, like complete silence. No one talked to me. Like I didn't talk to them. And I think I just went home and like went to my room and just cried because it was like realizing all over again that they had changed. They weren't actually the same people that I had left when I went to California. And grieving that was a long process and still is. And it was just very lonely, but I buckled down in the church hardcore. Went to church every Sunday, went to every institute, activity, and lesson. I brought one of my brothers one time to institute. And I mean, dates entailed like scripture study.
Oh, wow.
So like I was like, the church is everything. The church is me. Because I didn't even know who I was anymore, because I didn't even know what I liked necessarily, because all of that had been taken away for so long. And it was just a complete loss of identity.
And how long was that, would you say, where you were so merged with this identity?
I was home for like June to September. I got the opportunity from one of my aunts to go live at her house in Hawaii for about 3 months while she was doing work on the mainland. And I took the opportunity. And that time was when I really started rethinking the church and like what had happened to me and what my family had like mentioned to me, because my parents and my siblings would like bring up stuff about the church, which would immediately like shut off.
Sorry.
No, yeah.
During that 3 months they would bring up? Okay.
Yes, yeah. And it would just shut me off from any conversation at that point because it was like an attack on me.
And you were told not to.
Exactly.
You were told, right? You were told to
yes.
avoid those
point.
types of conversations from, the person who spoke with God, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I actually went to go see my mission president and his wife during those 3 months. I went with my grandma to go visit them.
Wow.
And that was a really, really hard time. It was really confusing because it just felt like they were bashing on my family, and I felt a lot of love from them, from my family. So it was confusing.
Yeah, almost did it feel a little bit like they were trying to replace the trust you at one point had and respect you had for your parents, that they were trying to kind of now make them untrustworthy and be close to you?
Yes.
Give you approval?
It was kind of like I was like the last one with the church. So it was like they were elevating me to the standard and expectation of like staying strong.
Yeah.
Like it's your job now to like be the one who saves your family.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
And I don't think without moving to Hawaii for that period of time, I would have probably still been in the church.
Right.
Because it allowed me that space from expectation from people to start listening to myself and what my soul and heart was saying.
Yes.
That's so powerful because like an onlooker might say, well, just go home, talk to your parents and your siblings, find out everything they found out, and freaking leave the church. But what I've learned is like I have friends who are twins, 2 sisters, spent their whole lives together till they each got married, and then one lost their faith in the church, and the other twin, it kind of drove a wedge between them. But even when the second twin started doubting, she didn't ever tell her twin that she was losing her faith in the church and or leaving it, because she wanted it to be her own process.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. It almost feels like it has to be a solo journey.
Yeah.
You have to experience the loneliness of it in order to like come to terms with making a decision for yourself.
And I think too, it's making me think of Mary Oliver's poem, The Journey. I don't know if you know that.
I need to look that
A
up.
lot of what you're describing is kind of this in this poem. But the voices had been so loud, the external voices telling you all the things. And that could be family too, as parents. And then you've got your mission president. And so the idea of the poem is that's where this person starts. And then they walk further and further away till the voice is quiet and they're left with themselves.
Yeah. That resonates
Yeah.
so much,
So you can
especially
hear
with that
yourself.
time.
Yeah.
Because they're so loud from everything around me. That it was
Yeah.
like, I get to sit with myself.
And what did you hear?
scary.
What did you hear in
Yeah,
Hawaii?
I attended a ward there. I think it was my second week there. I skipped church once, which was crazy for me. And then I went the next Sunday. Crazy, wild, so rebellious. But I went the following week, and I felt so uncomfortable. It was the first time when I sat in the chapel and something within me was like, this is wrong and this isn't serving you anymore. And I left immediately after sacrament meeting before anyone could talk to me. And I just sat in my car and like cried. And I don't think I formulated the thoughts at that moment in time, but I know that it was realizing like I didn't want to do this anymore.
You never did.
No, exactly.
But it's coming back. It's coming
Full
back
circle.
around to that.
Yes. And realizing, and
It's like a remembering.
and hearing myself, because the voices are like my mission president, my grandparents, my family, like they're gone, like they're not with me. So it's me telling myself like this isn't working for me anymore. And never did. That realization came further down the line, but and then I ended up working at a restaurant and picking up shifts on Sundays so I could have an excuse not to attend church. And I didn't attend church for the rest of my time in Hawaii.
What did you need to make that excuse to?
My grandparents.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, a mission president and companions like friends. And
Right.
What do you mean mission president?
I mean, I was still in contact with them, which is crazy, yeah. But they were my parent figures.
That's right. They substituted in.
Yeah.
I think I've heard that in the past decade, the Mormon Church has started to tell mission presidents that they have a responsibility to keep their missionaries active until they die.
Yes. I mean, that was hugely,
That's insane.
I believe
right?
it, because, oh my gosh, the endless amount of pamphlets I got about like daily routines and like checklists on things you need to do daily to like stay in the church.
Where did those materials come from?
They looked like they were just like printed off online, but I'm sure there's a place for mission presidents to access those.
So your mission president and wife were sending you pamphlets.
Well, he sent me home with those, like a big folder.
Yeah.
So
Of, like resources.
Yes.
And they have to be doing that because we've reported on Mormon Stories the statistic that 40% of Mormon missionaries are leaving the church within 6 months of leaving their missions.
doesn't surprise me.
Does that sound
That sounds right to me.
really?
Yeah, I mean, none of my companions left the church after their mission, but there's definitely missionaries I was close to that have left very quickly after returning home. So it makes sense to me, for sure. Yeah.
So all those pamphlets, what did they do?
Didn't help. They just made me feel guilty more than anything, and just like kept me in a system that wasn't doing anything good for me.
So that Hawaii time, how would you talk about it?
I was living my best life. It felt like I was realizing good wasn't solely owned by the church. Like I was experiencing relationships with these people who had never even heard of the church, who were absolutely amazing and like shared my values and were creative and kind and respectful, and actually people who liked hanging out with me and I liked hanging out with them, and they cared and valued the earth and the ocean and taking care of other people. And even though the church really claims to do that, it's in a backhanded way. It always felt like there's always a selfish reason behind it. And it didn't feel genuine. But these people were so genuine and so cool. And I wrote down, like, good isn't limited. Like, good is everywhere. And with that came letting go of the church was a lot easier because of that, and realizing the church doesn't own it. Like I can find good outside of the church.
Yeah.
And I can let go of that piece of me. But at the same time, my grandma came out for a month, and with that reinforced all of the church feelings and guilt and like, oh my gosh, I need to stay strong for my family. But
Wow.
I still didn't go to the church. I still go to church. And then those 3 months ended, and towards the end, I met my now ex-boyfriend, but he was just a really wonderful person. And like, I had my first drink of alcohol with him when I was in Hawaii for that first 3 months, and like felt fine. I was safe and with someone who cared about me and was like watching out for me. And I left Hawaii like really sad to go home because I was going to be going to BYU-Idaho in January. I got home from Hawaii in December. So it was about a little bit over a month of time I would be home before heading back to Rexburg. And I did not want to go back to Rexburg. Like with my whole being, I did not want to go back to BYU-Idaho.
Yeah.
And then I just met someone who I really cared about and who really cared about me and I valued. So it was hard leaving that and not knowing when I would be back to Hawaii, like with this person I cared about. So I got home and I went to church one more time. And it was Christmas time. So it was the sacrament meeting that they do a lot now, where people who go up on the stand and like share their favorite hymn. And then they'll say why it's their favorite hymn. And then everyone sings the hymn. And it felt like my time in the church was like complete. Like, that was it. That was my goodbye. And I left after sacrament meeting. I didn't attend the classes or anything.
Wait, did you pick a song? Did you have everyone sing?
I didn't. Okay. But I love music, and the hymns have always been, I always felt very close to God, singing the hymns.
And when you talk about leaving the church and you getting emotional, what are those feelings that you're feeling?
It was a moment of choosing myself after a long period of time of listening to everyone else and doing what everyone else was telling me to do. And it was regaining a part of me that had been lost for a long time, which was so powerful. And I never went back. I haven't been back since that day. That was like the funnest New Year's I've ever had. Like, I drank and me and my family had like a dance party, and it was like we were rebuilding our relationships. It felt like we were coming back together as a family. It was starting bit by bit to feel like whole again.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So you left the church to choose yourself.
Yes. Hands down. Yeah. And within 48 hours of being back from Hawaii, my mom asked me, because I was immediately like in this really bad mood coming back to Colorado. And my mom was like, well, what's up? Like, are you still wanting to like go to BYU-Idaho and like do nursing? And I just started crying. I'm such an emotional person, but something within me was like, it's not right. And it was realizing like I didn't have to do it. Like, it was a choice. It wasn't like a response, because it was feeling like a responsibility, like nursing, going back to BYU-Idaho.
Right.
It was something that other people expected of me. And I realized I didn't have to do that. So within 48 hours of being in Colorado, I made plans to move back to Hawaii the next month.
Yeah.
I had started scuba diving when I was there in Hawaii for 3 months, and I was offered a opportunity to train with this company and start working for them. So I called them up and was like, hey, are you guys, is that offer still up on the table? And they're like, yeah, come out and we'll train you. So, and my ex-boyfriend really helped in that process as well. Yeah, and it just, things started working out and feeling right, and like good again.
Yeah. Yep.
Wait, you mean when you started proceeding with the eye of faith, things fell into place? Is that what you're saying?
Quite the opposite, I feel like. Just listening to yourself, like listening to myself and my heart.
Things started to
work out and feel peaceful and like instead of being uncomfortable all the time and like anxious and on edge, it was like, oh, I can like take a breath and do the things that bring me joy.
Yeah.
They say that wickedness never was happiness, and I think the most wicked thing you could do is leave the church. What's been your experience? I guess you just kind of said it, but I just
Totally.
yeah.
No, quickly after like choosing to fully leave the church, I read the book Under the Banner of Heaven, which is like one of my all-time favorite books, because it taught me the real history of the church from someone who never was in the church.
Yeah.
And John Krakauer does such a good job in doing that. But at the end, I think it's just even the last page of the book, there's an ex-FLDS member that is discussing his journey coming out of the religion. And he explains how in the church, decisions are made for you. And it a lot of times can be easier because they provide answers for every aspect of life and every challenge. And you just get to turn things over to God and he'll take care of it. But at the very end, he says some things in life are more important than being happy. And that, like, thinking for yourself is what he ultimately ends up saying.
Right.
And for me, that was my experience. Choosing to follow and listen to my inner self was the most freeing thing ever.
Yeah.
And that's what I needed the whole time.
Right. Yeah.
So it's choosing me.
Choice.
And yeah. And while life is so much more dynamic now, like, I'm able to experience fully what I wanted life to be. Like, I'm fully able to accept when I'm sad and feel the sadness without guilt, feel the anger without guilt, experience happiness and excitement around things that maybe the church said was wrong, but like are safe and enjoyable for me.
Yeah.
With people who I enjoy being around and are respectful of me and my experience. And it's been such a beautiful thing to leave something that was so oppressive in my experience.
Through therapy, how have you come to look on your relationship with your mission president?
It wasn't, so I returned home in June 2021. And it wasn't until the end of last year,
2023.
Yeah, 2023, when I came to terms with my relationship with him being very toxic and controlling. Up until that time, I stood up for him and his wife, and I was like, they cared for me, they wanted the best for me, and they were doing like what they thought was best for me. And in some ways, I still think that's true, but it was the first time when I realized and felt deeply that what they had done to me was wrong. Mm-hmm. And it was such an eye-opening moment of just like, wow, like these people hurt me. And actually they didn't care about me.
Right.
And weren't aware or paying attention to what I was telling them and experiencing. And in a lot of ways, it hurt so greatly, but it was also empowering to realize that and take that piece of truth into my body and my mind.
Right.
Did you ever contemplate telling them that they hurt you, or just letting good enough be alone?
I actually, like last week, I wrote them a letter. I didn't send it because I felt like I just don't think it would make much of a difference to them. I think ultimately they feel they did the right thing. Mm-hmm. But for me, just being able to get that on paper and identifying the ways they hurt me, and I think the only reason I would send it is so that other people don't have to experience what I went through. I just don't want them to do what they did to me to other people. Which I have had other missionaries reach out to me who I served with or didn't serve with, served before me, say they experienced a lot of the same things I did from him. And I just don't want that to happen again. So that would be the only reason I would send it, I think.
Right.
Is to hope he would change.
But you don't have a reason to believe he likely would.
Yeah, I just don't think he would.
Yeah.
He would listen.
And sometimes I think it can be healing, part of the healing, to let that responsibility for other people, which is so ingrained in us in Mormonism, that we're responsible for other people. It's it's part of what makes young people go out on missions, right? Is that it can be part of healing to be like, it's not mine anymore. Like, I can just tend to myself now.
Totally.
I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely that's a process for me because I still feel guilty around especially my mission and just like how I reacted, but also needing to understand like I was doing what I was being told and what I felt was best at the time. So, and therapy has helped so much with that. I've been diagnosed with PTSD from that time. So obviously still a big process of figuring out how to live life with the situations I was put in. But I'm able to experience those without guilt or like shame. So there's beauty in the process.
Yeah.
So I'm so sorry that all happened. But I'm also so grateful that you're courageous, willing, generous enough to share your experiences. So maybe let me ask you this. If there is a young man or woman who's thinking about a Mormon mission, of course you don't want to tell them what's right or wrong for them, but what would you say, just in summary, to a young Mormon man or woman considering a mission?
It's really easy, like you said, John, to like just be like, don't go. But I feel that it is important to make the decision for yourself. So maybe even just like taking time away from family, away from church members, just taking the time to think about whether it feels right to you or not. And connect with yourself, because the mission takes a lot from you. I don't think you can avoid the mission taking a lot from you if you're going to follow the rules. So just listen to yourself. And also, informed consent has become such an important value and aspect of my life, and I desire that for every person into any situation they are entering. So listen to people's stories about their mission experiences. And even though, especially those out of the church, as well as like family members who have served a mission, because I just hope people understand what they're going to get into. And you don't know what you're going to get necessarily, because every mission president is a little bit different. So I just hope people choose themselves over an organization and what others are telling them to do.
What have you studied church history at all, or the church's truth claims since then? When you speak about informed consent, what should every Mormon missionary know about the church's history and or its truth claims, so that they can know that before they choose to go on a mission? What would be 5 or 10 of the most important things you've learned that you would say, go learn these things, go read about these things before you choose to serve? What do you even have an idea?
I mean, I feel like there's so many, but Joseph Smith and him practicing polygamy. I had no idea about that until after I decided to leave the church. But
anything particularly problematic about Joseph's practice of polygamy?
that he married children and teenagers. And people know that in the world. So it's important to realize that because people are going to bring it up and you're going to think it's not true, but it is. I would also say...
it wasn't just children. Were you going to list?
Oh, no. Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, other women married to other men.
Yes.
And mother-daughter pairs and sister pairs. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
why is he marrying 12 women who are already married?
Who knows?
Yeah.
I
don't mean to push myself into your narrative.
No, it's...
People should know that.
No, they should. Yeah. And they should be aware. I mean, that's part of the informed consent portion of things.
Yeah. And the church admits all this. This is not, go read the Gospel Topics essay on polygamy. It's all there.
Totally.
Okay,
yeah.
Sorry.
No,
so,
that's okay.
What else?
I just want people to really take time to think about the temple and like research what is done and why it's done. And the fact that it's Masonic, and take time to think about that experience. Even for me, I'm such a feeler, so I didn't really research anything or like read into the history of things before leaving the church. It was more of just like wanting to listen to myself and choose me. So it was after coming out of the church that I started researching the Book of Mormon, the temple, Joseph Smith's practice of polygamy, Brigham Young's racist teachings, which is also something I think people need to be aware of, like the racist history of the church and how demeaning that is to people and hurtful it is to like try to tell them that this is a better way to live when the church discriminated against them for so long.
You mentioned the Book of Mormon earlier as being like the key to your testimony. What should prospective missionaries know about the Book of Mormon?
I would just recommend like looking into how it was written, because it's elevated to being like this perfect masterpiece from God. Like Joseph Smith was this beautiful instrument in giving us these words that are for our day. But in reality, the way it was written was so different than what you're told. How it was written. And
like in what way?
I mean, with the rock and the hats, the rocks in the hat. I had no idea about that.
Yeah.
And it's a hard realization to come to, because the Book of Mormon is such an important piece of, for me, like what the church meant in my life. And realizing that it was a lot different than what I was told it was groundbreaking and like earth shattering in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Have you ever had thoughts or feelings about like the priesthood being men only versus women, or is that not?
For sure. And actually I started questioning that during my mission when I found out like in the temple, men can get divorced civilly and like remarry another woman. But like, yeah, in the temple. But women have to like get it totally like cut off by church leaders, and it's a long process.
A woman has to get church approval to divorce a man in the temple, but a man just marries the next woman in the temple and the next woman in the temple with no church obstacles.
Yep.
And that's because of polygamy, right?
Yeah, I guess that goes back to polygamy. Yeah,
Oh, it does.
But that's when I started questioning like priesthood. And I think it came later for me in my coming out of the church of just like the absolute separation of women and men and like just how patriarchal it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Oh, I was going to ask, what advice would you give to parents who are losing their faith or have lost their faith, and either they have a kid about to go on a mission or a kid who's on a mission? Because clearly it's like darned if you do and darned if you don't, you know?
It really is. And I would say just think about your child and like how they might process that information being told to them. And if they are struggling on their mission, see, I would rather have someone be honest with me and just tell me that they've left at the moment they've left, you know? Because I feel like it adds more pain that like being lied to about it. Because I kind of had both sides where my mom told me pretty much as soon as she knew she wasn't going back to church. And then my dad
waited.
For a couple months and a couple weeks. I think it was a couple months. And that hurt probably more than my mom telling me.
Looking back now, are you glad she told you?
Yes. I wish I would have listened to what she had to say to me.
So is that some advice to the missionaries? Listen to your parents?
Yeah, for sure. I guess, yeah, that's a great piece of advice. Listen to what they're saying. Maybe just take a minute and like hear their thoughts and why they're making that decision.
Ask them questions.
Yeah.
Ask them why they've left.
Don't be afraid. Yeah.
I mean, because in their minds, well, a parent can't love that missionary as much as the church if they're going to leave the church. That's what their mind's going to tell them. They must not really love me if they leave the church.
Yeah.
What's your experience?
They love you. The church makes you feel like they're choosing themselves over you, but in reality, they're wanting the best for themselves and their children. And that's why they're making that decision. Yeah.
Can you tell a prospective Mormon missionary with honesty and confidence and certainty that the church will look after their best interests and take care of them while they're on their missions?
I can't do that because over and over and over again, they neglected me when I needed them. Mm-hmm. So I can pretty much guarantee that you have to stand up for your needs. And a lot of times you don't have the energy or courage to do that because of how controlling and all in you are in this environment.
And do you feel like your Mormon mission hurt you? Do you feel it did harm to you?
I think I'll be recovering from my mission for my whole life. I have a lot of depression and anxiety. Obviously, I've been diagnosed with PTSD from that time, so I have a lot of triggers. And I also have struggled with like attachment issues. I have a really hard time leaving anyone I love. And over time it's gotten better, but I used to like have panic attacks every time I would have to like fly and be back to Hawaii from Colorado or vice versa. Just because you're torn from people you love over and over and over again on a mission, moving areas, switching companions. And there's just I will never recover. I hope I will recover from my mission, but it will always be a part of me. And it hurt greatly.
What does taking care of yourself look like now these days?
Yeah. I think it's trying new things, because a lot of things I loved before my mission were very wrapped up in God and showing my talents that God had gifted me. But discovering new things I love has been really fun.
Yeah.
Like scuba diving. I was a scuba diving guide out in Hawaii for 2.5 years. And that was something I really loved. And I got to like teach people how to do that. And I got back into like art, but changed my style of art because I feel like a new person. And so just trying new things has been it's brought a lot of joy into my life, despite there still being that darkness from my mission. Yeah.
And that's such a beautiful way, I think, to connect to and get to know you
Yeah.
by trying new things.
I agree. Yeah, it's returning, or even just like finding and discovering myself as a person, an individual.
Exactly. Exactly.
Which is difficult, but very exciting and fun.
Yes. Yes. And do you think too, like I do think Mormonism, even with the things that we might have loved or the talents we might have had, or even that felt tinged with a responsibility to grow that gift and bless people with that gift. So now do you find, I'm curious if you find it healing to allow the enjoyment of the thing, your enjoyment of it, to be enough?
Yes. And it's been a process. Something that I've really loved doing is hiking, and God was such a huge part of that. Like I went to hike to like connect with God.
Yeah.
And coming out of religion and identifying more with being like atheist and agnostic and losing that kind of belief, it's learning to experience things without so much meaning and just like being present and loving it because I love it and enjoy it. And there's big emotions don't need to be a part of it. Like I can just love it and be happy.
Yes.
So for sure. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow. Well, any other final words you want to say?
Just thank you. I mean, Mormon Stories has been such a incredibly important piece of coming out of the church and like reclaiming the value of informed consent and like really making a decision for myself. So, and people's stories have just been incredibly validating and important for me. So it's just such a gift to be able to come and do this. So thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, it's been our pleasure. This is going to help so many people. So
I hope so.
We're super grateful. And we really, did you talk about whether you still believe in God or Jesus or church, interested in other churches or any of that?
Yeah, I lean more atheist. I'm very much a here and now. This is the life and valuing it for what it is. I like being present. And I think even in the church, I had that innate desire to just like live life for what it is and like love it and do what I loved. But I wasn't really allowed to do that in the church. So now it's like I really get to just live and love humans for just being human. Like I really get to show unconditional love. So with that, I don't necessarily believe in a God, but it's freeing, and it's a beautiful thing for me.
Yeah, some say that's the worst, is you lose the certainty and you lose the confidence and that best friend
totally
that's there with unconditional love. But you're saying,
and it's difficult, I would say, coming out of that belief, but it's more important for me to live now and be present And it's brought so much joy and value into everyday life for me, more so than I ever had in the church.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm curious if I have an idea, but I'm wondering if you feel like it's a good one or not. But I was curious if you wanted to share your tattoo and the meaning of it with people.
There's more than one.
Yeah,
actually.
I know.
Well, her
I have a
recent
lot of
one,
tattoos.
She did one for the interview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to like commemorate this experience, and the Truman Show just feels very much like a waking up moment for me. And I just love that movie in the way that like you're freeing yourself from an organization that has not necessarily been helpful for you in your experience. So I don't know if it's still wrapped.
There it is.
But yeah, there it is.
The
And what is it?
Stairs going up to the door. Can you see it?
And
Yes.
that's it's Jim Carrey at the top
Yes.
saying,
what is it? Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, and good night.
yeah.
I need to redo that, but
It's beautiful.
yeah.
And that
So, it
represents
means a lot.
just leaving.
Leaving the church and choosing myself and to live a life free to think for myself.
Yeah. This interview reminds me a little bit of Brene Brown's book, Braving the Wilderness. In that book, she talks about Maya Angelou had a quote, "I belong to myself." And it may not be exact, but the general idea was, the idea of fitting in is that you always have to kind of compromise or sacrifice something about yourself. But true belonging, that we will never know true belonging with other people unless we belong to ourselves first. And that is your story. It
I
feels
love
like
that.
your story.
That's so beautiful. I need to read that. But that does,
So
yeah.
it's been beautiful to witness you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you
you
so
coming
much.
to a place of belonging to yourself.
It's been a wonderful journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're only like 20 whatever.
I'm 24, so still got a lot of life to live.
So all the choices and connecting to yourself and exploring
Yes.
and feeling all
Exactly.
the things.
Experiencing life in the way I've always wanted to experience life.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
wish you all the best.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Well, Rian Anderson, thanks so much for coming on Mormon Stories podcast.
Of course. My
Yeah.
pleasure.
Stay in touch.
Will do.
All right. Thanks, Margie. It's great to have you.
Yes. Glad
As
to be
always.
here.
And thanks to everyone for joining us today. Really quickly, thanks to everyone who makes this possible. Gerardo, Julia, Maven, Brooklyn, all our staff, our board. I want to thank all our donors. The primary source of financial support that we get is from our donors. And so we want to thank our donors for their support. We lose donors every month for a variety of reasons. So if any of you are in the position to become a monthly donor, that'll keep us going. So just go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor, and that'll allow us to keep doing what we're doing. We just renovated our website, so go check out our new website. We'll be making further enhancements, but it should be faster, simpler, more functional, and there's a lot more to come. So check that out. And we have a new application process. If you want to become a guest on Mormon Stories podcast, there's a form you fill out, you leave us with a video, and it just makes it easier for us to find the right people for the right topics. So please check that out as well. And be good to each other and be kind to each other. And we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories podcast. Take care, everybody.